Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of What If Naruto Became Tobirama's Heir. If you enjoyed the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 11. Next morning. Uzumaki Namikaze households. Naruto woke up with a splitting headache and groaned in annoyance. This was not how he liked to start mornings, he mused, sitting up. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back to his now focused mind. What the hell happened to me yesterday? He asked himself, remembering the pain that arose in his stomach, and rubbed it in thoughts. His thoughts were broken off when the door to his room opened, and he smiled at the two people who walked in. "Ohio Kat-chan." He chirped happily, making the red-headed mother smile. She sat down by his side and kissed his head softly while he hugged her. Tobirama sat down on the chair to the side with a little smile at seeing the happy child. Then Naruto remembered the question that was now bugging him repeatedly. "Kat-chan," he whispered softly, getting a hum from the mother who was brushing his silky locks softly. "What happened to me yesterday?" he asked nervously, making her glance at Tobirama while biting her lip. He gave her a curt nod, making her pull him closer in a tight hug. She had tried to persuade Tobirama to stall it a bit, but the man had been firm in his stance, saying if she didn't do it then he would. That was one thing she wanted to tell him herself. "Naru-chan, I have to tell you something, so please listen to me, alright?" she asked in a warm voice, making him look at her innocently, and nod. He was getting nervous at seeing the nervous expression on his mother's face while his master was too serious than usual. Whatever it was would be something important, he mused. "Kat-chan, I'm not dying, am I?" he asked in a scared voice, making her eyes widen at his assumption and pull his face in her neck. "Baka, why would you think that? I won't let anything happen to my baby boy," she whispered, making him smile and kiss her neck happily. His fears now completely washed away. He was thinking he might have had some disease which was killing him, but this made him settle down. "Then what is wrong with me, Kat-chan?" he asked innocently, making her heart clench at his words and cradle him gently. She kissed his head with a deep breath to let it all out. "Nothing is wrong with you, baby," she whispered, not having the heart to tell him. Her eyes turned to Tobirama pleadingly, who had been silent up to now and knew she won't be able to tell him. He shook his head, silently telling her he had to know it today. It was better he found out from them rather than any outsider, who might even try and take advantage of his lack of knowledge to manipulate him. "Naruto." His stoic voice rang through the room, cutting the thick silence like hot knife through butter. He was met with those curious baby blue eyes as Kushina was holding him like a lifeline. "You have the soul of the QB sealed within you," he stated bluntly, making those blue eyes widen in shock. What?" he stuttered in a small, frightened voice, making Tobirama sigh tiredly and just nod to tell him he had heard him right. "Yes, your father didn't kill the beast 8 years ago, he merely sealed it. Bijou are immortal constructs of chakra that merely disperse and reform, even if one does kill them in a few years. So he did the only thing he could. He split the QB into 3 parts, 4 taels worth of yin chakra got sealed within your sister, 4 taels worth of yang chakra in you brother, and 1 tael worth of concentrated demonic and natural energy in you along with its soul. You are the container of the QB no Kitsune's essence and consciousness," he said, and watched Naruto's face turn blank as his mind started processing everything. "So the special chakra that Mito and Menma have," he whispered, getting a nod from Tobirama, making him fall silent completely. "Demon spawn. Fox brat. Monster." All the whispers now made sense that he had heard around the village. Why he was treated like the plague and everyone just outright hated his existence. And they were right. They were right, I am a demon, he whispered, making Tobirama and Kushina widen their eyes in horror as he tried to hide within himself. Kushina was the first to break out of her stupor, and cupped his cheeks to make his shimmering orbs to look in her eyes. He looked so lost and vulnerable, her heart tore away at his completely helpless state and she choked back a sob. Now was the time to make his doubts clear and give him the right direction. Naru-chan, you know about sealing, right? She asked, getting a small nod from the frightened boy. So when I seal a kunai in a scroll, does it become a kunai? She asked as realization dawned on him as to what she was trying to portray. But the soul, he was cut off by the stoic Senju this time, is sealed within you. You and the QB are completely separate entities. The seal that appears on your stomach when you mold chakra is proof enough for this. The correct term to use for you would be a Jinchuriki, he stated when he heard Naruto whisper. The power of human sacrifice. He whispered the meaning of the word. He then started calculating on his earlier description about the sealing. Then what happened to me yesterday? He asked in a small voice, making Kushina's heart clench at his frightened voice. When your brother unleashed the Kyubi's chakra sealed within him, the Bijo's consciousness within you became agitated, no doubt in anger, when it felt its own chakra. It tried to weaken the seal by pushing its potent demonic chakra to loosen the seal, but I placed a tightening seal over it, so no need to worry about that anymore, he stated, getting a nod from the boy. But now he had one question that he needed answered right now. Why me? He asked simply, but those two words made Tobirama avert his eyes and Kushina to stiffen. Both knew what he was asking with those two simple words. Your siblings had taken after your mother, and since that chakra needs to be melded with your own to make it useful and under control, your father chose them due to their strong Uzumaki heritage. He knew you would take after him and awaken your own Kekkei Genkai, which would one day help you to tame and suppress the Kyubi if it is ever needed. The Sharingan is the most effective of Kekkei Genkais when it comes to controlling Bijus, he explained, and Naruto said nothing. Now he knew why his siblings were regarded as heroes. They held the pure chakras while the curse and taint was thrust upon him. And to top it off, his own father had put it over him and him alone. So I was just a scapegoat who had been given a job to suppress the Bijo if it ever tried to take over me, he asked, making Tobirama turn silent. It was true, no matter how cruel and blunt his words might be, that was the perfect explanation for it. Kushina though was dreading as to where he was going with this, and a pit of dread formed in her stomach. Naru-chan, he did it for the good of the village, she whispered half-heartedly, in a choked voice at seeing his sad smile and broken eyes. He shook his head and got off her arms and walked towards the door. Yes, I understand, Ka-chan, he did it for the good of the village, he said, making relief wash over her, but her eyes widened when she saw his teary eyes look back at her with a small sad smile. The village was saved, everyone lives happily. Mito and Menma are regarded as heroes for holding the huge power they were given. Everything went fine at a very small cost, he said softly in a sob. No, it wasn't. She tried, but he cut her off before she could go any further. Me, he whispered in a broken tone as the dam to his tears broke and everything became completely clear to him. The cost was very little, everyone got their share of happiness. But what about me? He asked, making her tear up herself while Tobirama sat silently, knowing what he was saying was true in every word, even if it was dripping with anguish and agony. Everyone hates me, I don't have any friends of my own except Hinata. And I'm sure she too would leave me to myself when she realizes what I really am. I have watched children play with Mito and Menma and treat them like royalty, but when their parents see me, they take them away. I saw everything, it hurt, but I let it go, not knowing the reasons. I tried to stay happy with what I had every day, I tried to smile when they smiled. But it hurt, it always did. I wanted a friend too, someone who cared about me and just talked to me. He spoke in tears, making her hands cover her mouth. She saw what he was bottling up all those years and how much it was hurting him. Then I found you, old man, he said with a little smile while Tobirama smiled sadly, remembering the day he had first seen the lonely boy on that wooden swing. You became my friend, my teacher. To be honest, after knowing everything today, you are the father I never really had. I was born without one, but I got one in you, he said in a sob, and Tobirama couldn't help but feel the warmth that enveloped his chest and let loose a tear himself. But now I see what I am just a sacrifice. And to top it all off, the person who did sacrifice me was my own father. He whispered, walking out of the room while closing shut, and Kushina buried her face in her hands and sobbed. She got up to follow him and bring him back when a hand clasped her shoulder. She looked back to see the stoic face of Tobirama shaking his head. But Oji-san, he needs me. She was cut off by his ever-firm voice. He needs to sort this out on his own. You and I couldn't even begin to comprehend the turmoil he is in right now. Let him have some time alone to cool off. He said warmly, making her tears renew. He hates Minato, doesn't he? She asked, making him fall silent for a few moments. I don't think so. He said, making her look at him in disbelief. You saw him, didn't you? His eyes held betrayal, anguish, pain, but not hate. He can try, but I know him, he doesn't hate the heart to hate him or anyone for that matter. He said, making her fall on the bed tiredly. You know what scares me the most, Oji-san? She asked in a sniffle, making him look at her curiously. Everything he said. I didn't have a word to make any of his words be any less true. To this day I hate the moment when Minato thrust everything upon his shoulders. Why only him? She asked in a sniffle, and he didn't say anything. Whatever he said would be more cruel and blunt to make it worse. Naruto walked down the stairs when Mito saw the tear-stained cheeks of her brother and instantly rushed to him. What's wrong, Naru? She asked worriedly, making the blonde smile at his baby sister. He said nothing, just cupped her cheek and rubbed it softly, merely walking past her a moment later. Nothing's wrong, Mito. I just want to be alone for now. He spoke in his usual soft voice, walking out the door. Mito saw his retreating back and couldn't help but worry about him. She was about to go out and follow him when she heard a voice from behind her. Let him go, Mito, he said, he needs to be alone. Let's get back to our training and not waste any more time, all right? Asked Menma, making her look at the door longingly one last time before nodding and following him out in the grounds. Meanwhile, Naruto walked aimlessly through the streets of the village. His mind too jumbled up with thoughts from the new things that were unraveled to him to even notice the cold glares and whispers going about around him. Before he knew it, he was on top of the Hokage monument. He went up to his usual spot and sat down on the fourth stone face while gazing at the village with a sad look, not at all like the usual shining eyes he always held. Why did you condemn me to all this, San? Was I nothing but a scapegoat to you too? He asked to nobody while keeping his gaze on the vast expanse of the village. He closed his eyes with a tired sigh when he felt a small presence behind him, making him stiffen before relaxing, and let a small smile grace his lips. You know, Hina-chan, you are really something to try and sneak up on me. You do know I have sensory abilities, right? He asked and smiled wider in amusement when he heard a soft eep from behind him. The soft sounds of footsteps came from behind him until she was by his side. She sat down beside him and he couldn't help but smile as she was, poking her fingers nervously while staring intensely at her lap. So why were you following me, Hina-chan? He asked curiously, making her cheeks turn pink as she realized she was sitting so close to him with no other person near them. And she just had to get caught, she thought sadly, wondering if he was angry at her. I saw you walking through the shopping district, and you looked very troubled and sad. So I followed you. She whispered softly. He smiled at the concerned girl, who was the only real friend he had. But for how long? She had told him the truth, except for the part that she had given her bodyguard Koa slip. Again. So you were worried about me? He asked, making her cheeks turn a rosy pink and nod shyly. Hi, you're my friend. She said meekly. He looked straight ahead and closed his eyes when he felt the soft, cool breeze pass his face. His silky golden locks rustled with it, making Hinata look at him adoringly. He looked so cute in her opinion with his calm expression, she thought, with a soft smile. She instantly averted her gaze with a blush when he looked back at her so as to not make him creeped out by her staring. Friend, huh? He said calmly, confusing her with his words. He saw her confused eyes stare at him curiously and smiled. Would you still be my friend if I told you something that would make you hate me, Hinata? He asked seriously, making her surprised when he used her full name. His voice held a newfound seriousness that made her understand it was quite important to her. Yes, I'll always be your friend Naruto-kun, she said shyly, making him smile sadly. Even if I told you that I had the soul of the QB sealed in me, Hinata? He asked in a sad voice, making her lavender orbs widen in shock. He averted his gaze while clenching his eyes shut. He just couldn't see her look at him with those hateful eyes. Does it hurt? He heard her mumble softly, making him look at her in shock. He saw her looking at him worriedly instead of a hate-filled gaze as he had expected. What? He asked, stuttering himself from her weird question. Does it hurt? You know the fox was quite big, so it must. She trailed off while looking at him in pure concern. He looked at her in disbelief. Don't you understand, Hinata? I have the QB sealed in me. That's why everyone hates me, he said, making two fox-like ears over his head to emphasize his point, and stared at her incredulously when she giggled softly in her hand. I can never hate you, she said in her soft voice, but had lost her stutter in a rare occurrence. You are not the QB. The QB was evil and dangerous, but you are kind, you always help someone if anyone needs it. You are not the big evil fox that everyone fears. You will always be Naruto-kun, my Naruto-kun, she said in her shy voice. He looked at her honest and soft voice while she looked at her lap, wondering how she had said so much to him, no less. She eeped softly when a pair of arms slid around her and wrapped her up in a hug. Hina-chan, you don't know how much it means to me, what you said just now. Arigato, he whispered while burying his face in her neck. Hinata turned crimson when she felt herself pressed against him tightly, while his soft breath tickled her neck. She hesitantly wrapped her arms around his chest and pressed her cheek to his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. She smiled when she felt his warmth envelop her and snuggled happily in his arms. She felt so happy and safe. Naruto held his only friend like a lifeline, and couldn't help but admire how soft and small she felt in his arms. She smelt so nice too, just like a vanilla flower. If this is a dream, please don't make it end, thought the shy Hyuga heiress when, much to her disappointment, he broke the hug off. Naruto saw her gazing down at her lap in embarrassment when she realized her had involuntarily pulled her up on his lap in the hug. His arms were still around her and she wasn't going to complain. Naruto brushed the bang by her face behind her ear, making her ticklish and try to shy away from his touch. He saw her looking at him with her pink cheeks, and he couldn't help but think how adorable she looked. He leaned down and pressed his lips on her cheek for a small innocent kiss to thank her like he always did for Minato and his mother. Hinata's heart hammered when she felt him kiss her cheek, and instantly her face resembled a tomato when she saw him giving her one of his sincere warm smiles. She stared at him with wide eyes while her hand traced the spot where he had kissed her. Naruto-kun kissed my cheek. Naruto-kun kissed me. Oh Kami. She squealed inwardly when she realized what had really happened, and all the blood in her body rushed to her cheeks. As the final words came to her mind, she did the only thing she could. She fainted. Naruto felt worried when he felt her head on his shoulder and realized she had fallen unconscious. He chuckled happily as he tucked her head under his chin and kept her in a warm hug until she was awake. You're too shy and cute for your own good sometimes, Hina-chan, he whispered with a smile. He felt so content and happy right now. All his negative thoughts and the feeling of being isolated in his own village now lay forgotten. He could still be accepted by people if they got to know him and find a few people at least. As he had found his first and best friend in the form of the peacefully snoring girl in his arms. He brushed her short indigo hair for 10 minutes in silence when he felt her move. He looked down to see her eyes stare into his and blink innocently. Her cheeks turned red when she realized what had happened, and looked down at her lap in embarrassment. She had fainted. It was so embarrassing. Her musings were cut short when a hand cupped her cheek and made her look directly into the worried baby blue eyes of her crush. She felt him grab her wrist and raise her sleeve to show her bruised and blue skin. What happened, Hina-chan? he asked softly, making her look down in shame. Her eyes teared up when she remembered why she had left her house in the first place. Naruto pulled her in a warm hug when he heard her sniffle and rubbed her back while she cried her heart out in his neck. Her arms clutched his chest tightly like a lifeline. His heart tore away when he saw the state his friend was in. "Hina-chan, it's alright," he cooed softly to calm her down. She cried for 5 minutes before her sobs turned to sniffles and she just laid her face on his shoulder. He brushed her soft hair while placing a kiss on her head to calm her down. Her heart warmed at how he always cared for her no matter what, just like she did for him. "What happened?" he asked warmly after a few moments of comfortable silence. "Tasama had Neji-ni-san spar with me today to show my progress to the clan elders. I lost pretty badly and he slapped me before telling me I was a disgrace to the Hyuga name," she said in between soft sniffles, making a growl die down in his throat. He cradled the cute girl in his arms gently while his cheek rested overhead. All his own problems now lay forgotten and the only thing on his mind was how a kind girl like her was suffering so much. She snuggled in his embrace, feeling as if he was absorbing all her pain in his own chest, and listened to his heartbeat with a soft smile. "Hina-chan?" he asked, running his fingers through her hair. "Hi," she squeaked out shyly, and he couldn't help the smile that graced his lips. "I cannot believe you lost so badly to your brother," he stated in a firm and confident voice, making her lavender orbs stare at him in surprise. She blushed a little at the confidence he held in her strength, but looked down in shame when she realized it was all for naught. "Neji is a genius of our clan." She tried to make him understand, but he cut her off in between. "Don't lie to me, Hinata. I know how strong you are. I have seen your spars in our academy. You are stronger than any other girl our age," he said in a warm and confident voice. Her eyes widened in surprise at his words. She looked into those fiery blue orbs that held the utmost faith in her. She tried to avert her eyes, but he caught her chin and made her look at his eyes. "Fight me, Hina-chan," he said softly, shocking her to the core. What?" she stuttered out in shock, but it did nothing to deter him. "Fight me," he said firmly yet again, making her gulp nervously. She couldn't fight him, anyone but him. He was the strongest in the academy, but that wasn't the reason she didn't want to fight him. "Please, not you," she squeaked out in embarrassment, making him smile. He cupped her cheek and rubbed it for reassurance like he always did for Mito, making her eyes stare at him innocently. "You will fight me, Hina-chan. Now come on, let's go," he said, making her confused with his words. A moment later she squealed in surprise when he stood up, his arms under her knees and neck, carrying her bridal style. She blushed and wrapped her arms around his neck to keep from falling and tried to look anywhere but his grinning face. Her blush turned crimson when she felt his nose nuzzle against her cheek. "Oh, well, you're too cute, Hime-chan," he cooed in a teasing manner. She puffed her cheeks cutely. He always called her Hime-chan whenever he teased her, and glared a little when he outright laughed at her intimidating. Well, as intimidating as it could be with her ever-present blush. She snuggled in his chest happily while he walked into the clearing behind the monument and put her down, much to her disappointment, and stepped back. She looked at him pleadingly when he flexed his muscles and dropped into his stance. "Come on, Hina-chan, take your stance. I have wanted to fight the strongest taijutsu style in our village for a long time," he chirped happily, making her nod meekly and drop into the revered gentle fist stance. Her eyes shot open in surprise when he was off in a burst of speed with a roundhouse kick heading for her head. She brought her arm up on instincts alone and blocked it, elegantly parrying it away. Her eyes followed his flowing hair and the small smile, showing how much he was enjoying it. She had watched that look several times. He always seemed to be so confident, even on the edge of losing. He would just smile like that and do something completely unpredictable. She loved that look no matter how many times she had seen it. She just wished she could have half the determination he had. She pushed her arm forward towards his stomach. Naruto saw her hand coming towards his waist and slapped it with the back of his hands towards his side efficiently. His eyes met hers for a moment before he launched a punch at her face. His own eyes widened when he saw her crouch down instantly and swipe her leg horizontally to take his legs out. He backflipped to avoid her attack and was surprised when his sharp eyes caught her coming for another palm strike when he landed and flipped yet again. Hinata was shocked but didn't let up her charge and charged forward, involuntarily activating her Byakugan in the spur of a moment. She was stunned beyond belief as she forced palm after palm and he flipped again and again 8 times before landing on his feet with that same confident smirk plastered on his face. Such agility and speed. Not even Neji ni is so quick at dodging each of my attacks, he has to resort to blocking too. She thought and looked at he crush in admiration. Naruto smiled as he saw her sweat-glistened face and how she dropped into her gentle, fist stance again. Her attacks were quite relentless and to the mark. Any lesser opponent would have been down since he remembered Tobirama telling him a single brutal palm strike was all it needed before you were down. And her father calls her a failure. If I didn't know any better, that brother of hers just won on luck alone. He thought in admiration for her himself as he watched her waiting for his charge. He had noted her eyes changing into her Kekkei, Genkai and couldn't help but see the difference as those eyes seemed to be looking right through him instead of at him. I feel so naked. His sweat dropped and shook away those thoughts. He charged ahead to end it with this one. He cocked his fist back and launched it in front of her with a feint. Her Byakugan though rendered his deception useless and she blocked his hand with a palm and cocked back her other hand to finish it with a strike to his chest. Naruto readied his hand for a block, but knew he was done for as she had his fist in her grip and would end it now. He had underestimated her eyes and now, he would pay for it. He launched his free hand towards her face in a punch and saw her eyes widen. Hinata watched his fist come and stop mere inches before her nose and sighed in relief. She smiled as their spar came to an end. You win, Naruto-kun, she said softly, her eyes reverting back to their normal as the veins around them disappeared. She watched his face turn blank and look at her strangely. Do I look weak to you, Hinata? He asked neutrally, making her eyes widen in shock and shake her head immediately. What? Not at all, Naruto-kun, she stammered out instantly, though his eyes narrowed in on her. Her eyes teared up at his mild glare. Then why did you pull your attack back at the last moment? He asked, making her look down. She had done that. She mumbled something softly which he didn't hear and repeated it again, a bit louder. I couldn't hurt you, Naruto-kun, she whispered softly, making his eyes soften at his friend. Now he knew what the problem was. You do know that pulling back an attack at your opponent in a spar is a disrespect to his strength? He asked her, making her look at him in shock. What you just did is the worst form of disrespect you can give me, Hina-chan. Losing would have been great, but what you just did is far worse than that, he said firmly, making her eyes turn misty from tears. I didn't mean to. Please don't hate me, she stammered as tears streamed down her eyes in fright. She was instantly wrapped up in a warm hug and she cried in his chest softly. She couldn't lose him, he was her only friend too. She held her tightly and put his chin on her head. I can never hate you, Hime-chan, you're my best friend, he whispered, making her sobs turn soft and look at him with her puffy eyes and red cheeks that were a bit swollen and made her look all the more adorable in his eyes. But never pull back anything in a spar. We spar so that, when we fight for real, we would know what we would be up against. What if Neji died because he thought that his opponent would pull back a little too? He asked softly, wiping her cheeks. She gasped as she realized the truth in his words. She hadn't ever thought of it like that. She looked at him innocently and sniffed when she saw his warm smile. So the next time you spar with Neji, fight him like you did with me until the very end. You're strong, Heim, really strong. I see it, and your father will see it too when he sees you go all out in your next spar, he said softly, making her look at him with a soft smile and a little blush. Why you think I'm strong? She asked shyly, making him smile and tuck her lock of free hair behind her ear, and like always, she tried to shy away from his soft touch in embarrassment, but didn't pull back. "Of course you're strong. With those back-to-back strikes I was back flipping for my life there, you know," he said playfully, making her giggle, and hit his chest softly. This was her friend, serious and calm one moment and happy, lazy and playful the next. "Arigato," she said shyly, and he nodded when she felt him turn around and crouch down, making her quite confused. "Hop on Heim, you won and now you get a free ride home," he said playfully, making her giggle and wrap her arms around his neck from the back. He put his arms around her knees and picked her up piggyback style. She put her chin on his shoulder as he started jumping down the trees and through various rooftops quickly. She glanced at his eyes that were looking ahead and how his hair flowed in the wind. She nuzzled her cheek against his happily, making him do the same as he hopped towards the Hyuga clan compounds. Hyuga clan compounds. Naruto jumped down and crouched down as she stepped down when they reached the gates. "Alright Hina-chan, I'll see you at the academy tomorrow, alright?" he asked, getting a meek nod from her. He rose an eyebrow when she fiddled with her feet and her cheeks were red in embarrassment from something. "What's the matter, Hina-chan?" he asked in a concerned voice. She looked up and quickly pecked his cheek, muttering arigato before hopping back into her house, leaving a stunned Naruto behind. He scratched his cheek, which had turned pink, and grinned foxily, tucking his hands in his pockets to walk back home while shaking his head. "She really is something else, all right," were his last thoughts as he made his way home. Chapter 12. Konohagakure no Sato. Time skip 1 month later. A training field on the outskirts of the village. "Is this exercise really necessary, old man?" asked the calm voice of our favorite blonde, who was a bit peeved at the condition he was in at the moment. "This exercise will really help you if that is what you are asking me," came the answer from the stoic visage of his master. You might ask why Naruto was so peeved. Well, he was currently standing on his hands upside down. Now one might say that isn't a really big thing for a training shinobi, but it would be since his master was standing on the soles of his feet with his arms crossed and his eyes closed. "Keep your chakra stable to make me stick to your feet, and your balance must be perfect. This has multiple advantages for you," he said in his ever-calm tone to the blonde who had his shirt off along with Tobirama as the half-naked master and disciple went forward towards their next phase of training. "And what would that be, old man?" asked Naruto calmly, trying to focus as best as he could under the enormous strain the exercise was putting on him. "You have to keep pumping chakra into the muscles of your arms so that you could counter the strain of my weight and not slip off the wet surface underneath. Also, just like the surface sticking exercise, you have to keep the perfect amount of chakra to the soles of your feet to keep me balanced perfectly," he said, getting a grunt of agreement from the blonde underneath him. "Plus, since I am not focusing on developing the strength of your body and instead focusing on speed and agility, the resistance your muscles build to counter the enormous strain would make you more efficient at blocking heavy blows from your enemy and not be completely defenseless if the enemy counters your speed somehow," he said, making Naruto realize there were quite a few advantages to this exercise. "But still, do we have to do this underneath a waterfall then?" he asked tiredly, making Tobirama smirk. He had picked the location for the exercise to be underneath a waterfall, henceforth the annoyance of his disciple over the past couple of weeks. He was surprised that he had resisted so long without complaining. "Yes, the water flowing all around you makes it harder for you to focus. The ground underneath you is slippery, making another obstacle. And most meditation exercises are done in places like these for that very reason. You know why we have to make you emotionally and mentally stronger, don't you?" he asked, getting a strained hi from the blonde. "I didn't want to waste your time on only meditation exercises and make your training fall behind. So I made you do this instead," he said ever calmly, and Naruto wobbled a bit before getting his balance right and sighed in relief, making some water spout in his mouth much to his annoyance. "Where the hell did you pick up such an exercise anyways?" he asked in irritation as some more water went in his nostrils. This was the way shinobi used to train back during the clan wars era. After the formation of villages, peacetime settled in and exercises were made a lot easier. "This is old school, as you would put it," he said, and jumped with a flip in the air to the shore when Naruto started falling down. He saw him falling freely and jumped forward, catching him mid-fall, and saw that he had fallen unconscious from the drain it put on him. 1 hour and 37 minutes, you broke your previous record, then disciple. He muttered to himself with a smirk and laid him down under the shade of a tree. He saw the calmly snoring blonde with an innocent expression on his face, making him smile. He was worried what he might do and outright change after the truth to his burdens were revealed. He didn't know what had happened in the few hours he was gone that day, but whatever had happened to him to make him just accept the truths made him glad. What he felt on them was a whole different matter altogether, since he didn't want to talk about it. Kushina and himself hadn't pushed the matter any further to let him have his space. His thoughts then turned to a different place altogether. He gazed at a particular spot in the forest and his hands blurred through some strange hand signs which did nothing. A few moments later, a few silhouettes appeared kneeling in front of him in a formation. 2 of them wore strange animal masks, with the leader wearing a dog mask. "Tobirama-sama," said Inu while bowing his head. Tobirama nodded in acknowledgement to the man as well as the 4 figures behind him. "So what did you find out?" he asked in a voice that meant business. Inu took out a small envelope from his hip pouch and handed it to the man. Tobirama scanned through its contents quickly with a critical gaze, making sure he had done and read everything right. He scowled as he finished reading it and incinerated the papers with a small fire jutsu. "So Root still exists," he said finally after a few moments of tense silence, getting a nod from them all. He closed his eyes and thought for a second before speaking up. "Hiruzen has gotten too lax. Even after the various atrocities Danzo has committed, that fool is letting him roam free within the village with such a high standing in the council," he surmised, making the 5 of them just nod silently. Ina's eyes traveled to the softly sleeping boy and his mismatched eyes softened beneath his mask. "So he really is your apprentice, then, Nadame-sama," he said, breaking him out of his thoughts for a moment and smile as he followed his gaze. "Yes, I've taken him under my wing. It's nice to actually raise a student who doesn't disappoint me like my previous ones," he said with a hint of venom at the end, making them all turn silent. Inu removed his mask along with Nico behind him, breaking the Ambu code by revealing their identities to someone other than the current Hokage, showing the faith they still held in the man. "So what do you propose, then, Nadame-sama?" asked Kakashi, making all pairs of eyes turn to him curiously. He said nothing, gazing at them all with his narrowed gaze, making them squirm under his intense eyes. They still held the power they did when he reigned over the village, and they couldn't help but be intimidated by the man. Might Guy, Genma Shiranu, Yugao Uzuki, Asuma Sarutobi and Kakashi Hatake sat there kneeling in front of him like their cage, awaiting his response. "He is a threat to the village, along with his operations that he has going underneath the village's nose," he said, pointing to the leftover ashes of the papers, making them all nod. "You all do know that what you really have and are doing can be considered treason by the village?" he asked after a moment, getting just silence from them all. "Yes, but if it helps the village, then it can't be considered treason, really. Sandaime-sama has let a lot happen underneath the village's eyes, and if it comes to us to clean it, then so be it," came the firm reply of Genma Shiranu, making Tobirama raise an eyebrow. "He is your Hokage," he stated, getting a shake of the head from the Senbon munching man. "I was sworn in under Yondaime-sama's reign as his personal guard. My loyalties lay first and foremost to him and his family, then to the good of the village," he said, making Tobirama smile. That was why he had chosen these 5 to go in undercover and retrieve information from the main branches of the shinobi departments. He looked into their determined eyes and couldn't help but feel pride in their eyes. The will of fire still burns brightly within the village you envisioned, Hashirama. He thought in nostalgia at remembering the beliefs of his deceased elder brother, and a moment later his eyes hardened to the eyes of the veteran Kage who had taken command over the Leaf in 2 great shinobi wars. "Then I have a mission for the 5 of you," which will be done in the shadows of the leaf," he said cryptically, getting a nod from them all. "Tonight we move in. You five will accompany me to do what should have been done years ago," he said, making them all nod silently. "What do you intend to do to Tobirama-sama?" came the rarely serious voice of Guy, making him look at him coldly, and the man shivered at the look of steel in his eyes. "Tonight I will clean out the mess that Hiruzen has spread in the depths of the village. And I will not make the same mistake he did all those years ago with his prized pupil," he said, making realization dawn on their faces. The mission was clear to them now, even if he hadn't said it clearly. Danzo Shimura will be assassinated tonight. Meanwhile, in the Hyuga clan compounds, "Hajime," rang the voice of the Hyuga clan head through the training dojo. His stoic and blank face gazed at the young ones dropping into the gentle fist stance for their spar. The Hyuga elder stood by his side to make the deduction of the monthly progress the Hyuga clan heiress was making. Veins bulged around Hinata's eyes as she slipped her palm up front, and her other palm by her waist, awaiting her opponent's charge. Neji's Byakugan glared at the indigo-haired girl before charging forward with a quick palm thrust. Hinata looked at the incoming attack till the last moment before briefly tilting his head to the side while the chakra-laced strike whizzed past her ear harmlessly. She brought the palm around her waist, forward, making Neji's eyes shoot open in surprise and instantly jump back, but still got a glancing blow, making him grunt and hiss in pain. He narrowed his eyes at the girl, re-entering the gentle fist stance again. But all he focused on were her eyes. They didn't look as hesitant or nervous as before, like their previous spar. The look in her eyes has changed. What is going on? He thought to himself before shaking the thought off with a smirk and charged forward. No matter, fate has decreed that I shall win this spar like always. She is destined to lose like the failure she is, he thought confidently, thrusting his palm forward that was slapped to the side efficiently by the girl, and he dodged her strike yet again. He smirked when he saw her outstretching her arm and went in to finish the spar. He brought his palm in a curve to her waist for her liver, but was shocked when she rolled around him and was back to back with him, using her superior flexibility in a completely unpredictable maneuver. She turned around and thrust her 2 fingers to the back of his neck. He saw the strike coming with his Byakugan's 360-degree vision and rolled forward to dodge the hit and make some distance between them. He couldn't believe it, he was on the defensive this time. The last time he had utterly humiliated her, but she was quite fierce in her strikes this time. He was caught off guard by her sudden charge and blocked her palm strike to the side barely, but his eyes widened at the second incoming strike. He tried to move away, but he got a glancing hit to his waist near his kidneys, and winced in pain. "That's enough," rang the voice of Hayashi, making the 2 stop instantly. Neji growled and seethed inwardly. He had lost to the failure. She had gotten the hit in their first spar. But how? There wasn't an ounce of hesitation or pulling back her blows like always. What had made her change so much? He thought furiously as he watched Hayashi and the elder Hyuga by his side walk up to Hinata. Hinata bowed politely as was the custom, when she felt a hand clasp her shoulder. Her lavender pearls looked up to see Hayashi's stoic face. But she noticed the slight smile and the hint of pride in his eyes. "You have improved a lot over the past month, Hinata, just like what the Hyuga clan expects from its heiress, next in line to the throne," he said stoically, making her eyes widen in shock. She had just gotten a single glancing blow and there were several more spars to go yet. "Indeed, that was a most excellent maneuver," came the voice of the elder beside her father, making her even more shocked. Her eyes watered a little from the first form of appreciation she had gotten from her father, making Hayashi's eyes harden. "Do not look weak, Hinata," he scolded in a half-hearted tone, making her wipe her eyes and nod apologetically. "Gomen-sama, there was something in my eyes," she said with soft sniffle, making the 2 men glance at each other and smile a little. She couldn't lie to save her life, but it was nice that she was trying to negate her weaknesses now. "Alright, let's get back to it. There are several more spars to go," barked out Hayashi commandingly, making her nod and return to the middle of the ring while Neji walked off and Ko took his place. He threw her a death glare before walking off that she didn't notice. There was a soft smile plastered on her face as she stepped back to avoid the palm from her opponent and jumped a little for a kick to his chest. A pair of eyes watched her elder sister adoringly from the slightly open door in complete admiration. Oni-sama is so kind, pretty and strong, were the thoughts of a young Hanabi as she watched her sister spar with the branch member for a few hours from the crevice in the open door. A few hours later, Hinata walked out of the dojo. Her clothes and skin bruised and battered with a tired yet happy soft smile on her face. She walked through the hallways and quickly made her way down to the gates of the compound. Hanabi watched her sister run out of the compound and followed behind her curiously as to where she was going. Hinata ran through the streets and into the Uchiha clan's abandoned training ground. Hanabi followed her happily and watched as her Oni-sama hid behind a tree shyly and grew confused. She followed her gaze to see a blond boy standing on the porch of the wooden port on the lake. She watched the boy's hands move in some strange ways which were too quick for her young eyes to follow. Her eyes widened at what followed a moment later. Fire style, Grand Fireball Jutsu. She heard the boy shout and much to her amazement, he spouted a narrow stream of flames before they expanded in a huge fireball. The red-hot flames made a hiss in the calm water of the lake as Naruto watched on with a smirk at the perfect fireball. Finally, he thought with a tired sigh and smiled a little when his senses tingled towards a familiar presence. "So what brings you by Hina-chan?" he asked in thin air, making Hanabi shocked and narrowed her eyes at the boy if he tried to hurt her Oni-sama, who had been caught. She watched her elder sister run up to him and throw herself in his arms. Naruto chuckled as he twirled her around, while she squealed a little in glee and put her down. He brushed her hair as he heard her giggle in his neck and was slightly curious at her newfound happiness. "You seem awfully happy today, Hime-chan," he teased, but much to his amazement, she looked at him and giggled softly with a nod. He rose an eyebrow at her strange behavior when she spoke up. "Tasama praised me today, Naruto-kun. And it's all because of you," she chirped in a happy soft voice, making him raise an eyebrow. "Me? What did I do?" he asked in a lost voice, making her giggle and kiss his whiskered cheek in happiness. She didn't even have the heart to feel shy as to how happy she felt right now. Naruto's cheeks turned pink and he rubbed his neck nervously in embarrassment. She put her face in his neck and hugged him tightly. "Arigato," she whispered softly, making him smile and hug her back happily. Though he broke the silence a moment later. "But you didn't tell me you brought a little guest with you," he said, making her look at him in confusion and tilted her head to the side cutely. He pointed to some bushes and she instantly activated her Byakugan and rushed to the bushes with wide eyes. "Hanabi!" she shouted, running and picking her baby sister up in her arms. She blushed when she realized she had hugged and kissed Naruto-kun again, and in front of her sister, no less. "What are you doing here, Minato?" she asked and gushed over how dirty she had become, making the little girl grow quite embarrassed from her sister's actions. "I followed you, Oni-sama, but who is he?" she asked, pointing to Naruto, who now stood by her side with his hands in his pockets with his usual lazy expression marring his face. His eyes looked at her expectantly, making her sigh tiredly at her little sister's recklessness. "She is my sister, Naruto-kun, her name is Hanabi," she said in her usual slight stutter, making him chuckle. "I was wondering when you would do that again," he said in chuckles, making her cheeks turn red in embarrassment, and poked her fingers shyly. Now he was back to teasing her and she wasn't her hyper-happy self anymore. Hanabi glared at him heatedly, seeing him embarrass her Oni-sama so much. "Hey, don't be mean to my Oni-sama," she shouted in her squeaky voice, making him raise an eyebrow at the little outburst. Hinata's eyes widened in shock. "Hanabi!" she hissed, but both parties ignored her. Naruto crouched down, looking at the small glaring 3-year-old with his lazy smile. He put his finger on her nose and pushed her back a little, making her yelp and stumble slightly. "And what are you going to do about it, my little firecracker?" he asked in amusement, making her throw a death glare at him. It made her look all the more adorable as he pinched her chubby cheeks happily. "Stop doing that. And my name's Hanabi Hyuga, not Firecracker," she said as she tried to slap away his hand, but he continued on with her other cheek much to her annoyance. "And I am the younger daughter of the head family of the Hyuga clan," she said, trying to make him intimidated like everyone did when she told them who she was, but it instead made Naruto gush at her even more. "Oh, you're a royal firecracker, isn't that cute?" he cooed happily, making her cheeks turn red from his pinching and blushing and embarrassment and anger. Hinata was giggling in her hand softly at how Hanabi was trapped in Naruto's teasing. She rubbed her cheeks in irritation when he let her go and glared at him, which he shrugged off happily. "Who are you?" she asked, making him smile lazily and bring his hand forward to ruffle her hair, which made her let out a whine. "The name's Naruto, my little firecracker," he said lazily, and she fixed her hair while glaring at him angrily. Who did he think he was anyways? She thought angrily. No one had ever teased her so much and always treated her like royalty, though she was only 3 and a little chubby. He turned to Hinata with a soft smile and rubbed her cheek softly, much to the little one's annoyance, while Hinata blushed and shied away from his touch cutely. "So I'll see you tomorrow at the parents' special day at the academy, ni Hina-chan? Now I'll go, I'm beat from training today," he asked, getting a meek nod from the shy girl. He waved his hand as the two girls watched his retreating back. "Oh, and I always knew you would do it, Hina-chan," he said with a slight wink, making her avert her eyes and look down shyly. He chuckled and went towards his home. She caught Hanabi's little hand in her own, walking back to the Hyuga compounds. "You shouldn't sneak out from home without anyone knowing, Hanabi. It is dangerous," she scolded in her soft voice, making the girl puff her cheeks cutely. "But I wanted to see where you went, Oni-sama," she squeaked out, making her smile and pull her head around her waist. They walked in silence while Hanabi smiled at the small hug her Oni-sama was giving her. But then she remembered the annoying blonde with those strange whiskered cheeks from before. "I don't like whiskers," she muttered angrily, making Hinata giggle and rub her head softly, knowing what or who she really meant. "He's not that bad once you get to know him, Hanabi," she said softly, making Hanabi look up at the admiration her voice held for him. She said nothing and walked back to her house in silence. That night, Senju clan compounds. Tobirama clicked his blue battle armor in place and picked up the faceplate with the leaf insignia printed over it with a soft gaze. He rubbed it with his thumb with a strange gaze. He hadn't thought he would ever have to put it on again, but drastic times called for drastic measures. He smiled when he saw the 5 awaiting figures outside. He had chosen them, seeing they held the village above the council, or even their acting cage if it meant the welfare of the leaf. "Let's move," he said in a commanding voice, getting a nod from the 5, each of who had donned the blank Anbu masks and armor for tonight. They whisked past the rooftops, around the Anbu patrols in complete stealth, and towards the residential district near the Hokage Tower. They crouched down and gazed at the house from 5 different angles like hawks looking at their prey. Tobirama raised his hand and made several hand signs to give them their orders. "There must be root Anbu in the shadows. Be on guard and eliminate anyone who appears suspicious without a thought. The target will be eliminated by my hands," were his orders. The 5 nodded and disappeared into thin air, with Tobirama doing the same. He scaled the silent hallways with complete precision and stealth, his hawk-like eyes catching a slight disturbance in the air. He took out a kunai and twirled around the corner to stab it in the jugular of the root Anbu hiding under a camouflage genjutsu. He fell down with a slight thud while Tobirama moved forward towards the room where the target resided in. He saw the house down the garden way and the 2 groups of Anbu patrolling around a single room. His eyes narrowed when he saw 2 figures hover above them. The purple-haired Anbu cleaved the heads of the 3 Anbu clean as she fell down the middle in complete silence. Kakashi's hand sparkled in electricity and it in the chest of the Anbu, while Asuma cleaved the heads of the 2 remaining ones with his trench knives. He always knew his father was getting soft, but after he had seen the files and what the man had overlooked for the supposed good of the village, he had instantly agreed and wanted in on the Senju's plan to clean off some filth himself. Genma and Guy took points at the door as Asuma kicked the locked door open. Gain grabbed the Anbu that charged at them by his neck and snapped it with a flick in an instant as the dead body fell down like a sack of potatoes, while Genma launched several senbons at the shocked Anbu's several fatal points as he too fell dead in a silent thud. Tobirama and Kakashi walked in to see the one-eyed cripple glaring heatedly at them. "What is the meaning of this, Tobirama-sensei?" he asked angrily, making Tobirama look at him with his cold onyx eyes. "I am merely doing what should have been done years ago," he said, making Danzo growl angrily at the man. "Do you have the heart to take out your own student?" he asked to manipulate his teacher's emotions, while the five had circled around all the exit points of the room and were watching the surrounded man like hungry predators. "I am not Hiruzen Danzo," he said before he vanished in a blue blur as a burst of speed. His two fingers sparkled with wind chakra laced in them as he moved them towards the bandages, covering his left eye. His fingers went clean through the bandages, courtesy of the wind chakra in them, and he plucked out the eye in the supposed empty eye socket with a squelch. None of them even moved a little as Danzo jumped back and hissed in pain while clutching his bleeding left side of the face and glared at him heatedly. "How did you know I had it?" he asked while gritting his teeth at the unexpected attack, and watched as Tobirama put the Sharingan in his right palm in a small vial and sealed it in his wrist with the other one to match it. "That you do not need to know," he said coldly, making him clench his fists in anger at losing such a powerful eye in an instant when he let his guard down for but a moment in front of his sensei. The man was a true shinobi still, and unlike Hiruzen would finish him off without hesitation. He had to escape. Rat boar monkey. He went through hand seals and activated his jutsu when a yellow sparkling blade pierced his chest a moment later. He gurgled blood as he watched the hardened eyes of Tobirama Senju, and his hands holding the legendary Raijin no Ken, which was pierced in his chest. Tobirama's eyes widened when he saw the man in front of him disappear and rolled to the side to avoid a kunai. He watched with narrowed eyes as Danzo jumped back towards the exit behind him, but Yugao covered it while unsheathing her sword. Tobirama ran the situation in his head. He had definitely pierced Danzo and not a clone. He wasn't in any genjutsu, that was for sure. "Then, how did you escape?" he asked, making Danzo turn silent and said nothing for a moment. "Why are you doing this, sensei?" "I always did what was good for the village." "Is this for the Ukas? You hated them?" He was cut off by Tobirama's cold voice. "Don't assume you know me, Shimura," he spat out venomously. "I never hated the Uchiha. I always kept everyone who were suspicious or a threat to the village under scrutiny, be it the Ukas or the Senjus. But I would never fall as low as to do what you manipulated Hiruzen into. You both wiped out the founding clan of this village to near extinction in a mere night. For what?" he asked coldly, making Danzo growl in anger. "They were planning a rebellion, sensei," he argued, making Tobirama's eyes turn even colder. "And Shisu was about to stop them until you killed him for his eyes," he said, making Danzo's eyes widen in shock as to how he came across whose eye it really was. "But that was a temporary solution. They would have rebelled again, and you know an Uchiha was behind the Kyuubi attack too," he argued yet again, making Tobirama smile sadly. "You always were power-hungry, Danzo. I had seen it when you were under my command. That was why I never chose you for the position of Hokage, even though you were a better choice than Hiruzen. You wanted the whole world under the thumb of the leaf with you as its supreme commander," he said, making Danzo glare at him. "And what is wrong with that? I wanted to achieve true peace. I did what I had to," he said, making Tobirama smile sadly. "And I am doing what I have to," he said, vanishing in a blue flash, and appeared behind Danzo a second later, making everyone's eyes widen at seeing the original Hiruzen in action. He pointed his sword down when Danzo's head fell down clean off his shoulders with a thud. Kakashi, Guy and Genma watched in horror when Danzo disappeared yet again and appeared behind Yugao completely unharmed. Asuma pushed her away when he tried to stab a kunai in her chest and started going through head seals with Kakashi going through his own. Wind style, vacuum wave / earth style, earth wall. Both exclaimed at the same time when a wall of mud was erected in front of Tobirama, Yugao and Asuma while it broke off from Danzo's jutsu. Kakashi cancelled the jutsu and saw Danzo not there anymore. Asuma punched the ground in anger. Damn it. That bastard is like a cockroach. No matter how many times you squash him, he keeps getting back up. He shouted in anger when he realized they had failed the mission. He felt a hand grasp his shoulder and turned around to face Tobirama with a small smile. Do not worry, he will have to escape the village now. He cannot stay here any longer. There are way too many evidences and leaks that he would have to explain if he did, sparing the dead root Anbu in this mansion currently. The village is rid of him for the time being. His time will come, keep your cool. A shinobi loses when he lets his emotions loose in times of stress. That is why I made Rule 27 of the Shinobi Code so that no shinobi may show emotions on a mission. Let's go and seal up those bodies for future evidence in case it comes back to us. The mission isn't over yet, he said stoically, making the young Sarutobi nod and stand up while they started sealing up the dead bodies and various other evidences from the mansion that they found. Tobirama clenched his fist in anger and just couldn't understand how he was still alive, even after he had killed him for sure not 1 but 2 times. Danzo, you will die by my hands, mark my words. He thought as they left the now abandoned and clean Shimura mansion and disappeared, scattering like shadows in the death of night. Chapter 13. Time skip 1 week later. Konohagakure no Sato. Uzumaki Namikaze households. The weather in Konoha was a lot different this fine morning from what the villagers were usually accustomed to. The whole village was covered with gray clouds, lightning crackled in the air with enough intensity to make a few light-hearted people scared out of their wits. This was the case in a room in our favorite household. Naruto felt something grab him by his waist quite forcefully and couldn't help but wince from the death grip. He opened his eyes to see an all too familiar mop of red hair and the trembling form of his baby sister. He smiled a little and wrapped her up in a warm loving hug, running his fingers through her hair. Mito is still scared of lightning, huh? He asked playfully in a whisper, making her look at him heatedly. Her violet orbs tried to burn holes through his head when another burst of lightning came from the window and she was curled up against him again. Naru. She squeaked out with a soft sniffle, making him smile and kiss her head gently. Hi. He asked, making her teary violet eyes gaze into his calm blue ones. Why aren't you scared of lightning? She asked with yet another sniffle. He chuckled and rubbed her cheek like always, making her look at him innocently. Now what kind of a big brother would I be if I am scared of a little loud sound? Anyways, I kinda like this weather, he said, making her smile. In her eyes, her brother wasn't scared of anything as far as she could remember. She could always go to him for any problem, and he would be there, just like that. Naru, I'm scared, she whispered in his neck with a small sniff. He just held her close and nuzzled his cheek against hers, making her giggle happily. Of what? He asked in his soft, calm tone. Today we are going to have all parents at the academy for showcasing our abilities. She sniffled, making him nod. He already knew that. What if I don't do good? She whispered, making him chuckle. She glared at him when he just smiled back. And what's the real reason? He asked, gently brushing her hair out of her face. She averted her eyes in embarrassment as he saw right through her like always. I don't want you and Menma to fight, she whispered. Now he was in a loop. What was she talking about? He mused but heard her out silently. He doesn't like you very much, Naru, she whispered sadly, making him frown. He cupped her cheeks and made her look into his eyes. What do you mean, Mito? Speak clearly, he stated in a firm tone, making her bite her lip nervously. She had to get it out now. Menma, when he sees you, it's like he's. She stuttered nervously. Naruto squeezed her cheeks for reassurance and looked at her warmly. "He's what, Mito?" he asked in a warm tone, making her smile. "Jealous," she said, finally making him quite confused. Now he was in for a loop. Shouldn't it be the other way around? "Jealous of me? Mito, I think you're looking too much into it," he said, getting a shake of the head from his sister. "No, Naru, you're so good at everything you do. Even when Ka-chan decided to stall your training, you trained yourself before finding Tobirama-sama. And he took you on as an apprentice. You should hear how much Ka-chan is proud of you. She's always said how big of an honor it is to be trained by him personally," she said, making him nod slightly. He could see her point in that. But not that it still made any sense to him. "But you and Menma get trained by Ka-chan, not to mention Pervy Sage. I mean, he is one of the 3 legendary Sannin, right? Strong enough to rival even the Hokage. The man trained our father, Mito," he said, running his fingers over her cheek while she sat silently taking it all in. "Naru, can you do something for me?" she asked timidly, making him nod instantly. "Anything, Mito, you're my baby sister. Just say it," he said, making her smile softly. "If you and Menma have to fight, please let him win," she asked pleadingly, making him stunned. "You mean let him win?" he asked incredulously, getting a nod from the bubbly girl. He was about to say no when he saw her on the verge of crying. He sighed, running his hand through his hair in frustration. This went against all his rules, but maybe just this once he could promise her if it made her fears wash away. "All right," he said in defeat, making her perk up. "If it comes down to me fighting him, he'll win. But just this once, all right?" He couldn't finish because a red blur had already barreled into his chest. He chuckled at the happy girl in his arms and tried to pry her off, but to no avail. After a few minutes of fighting and barreling, Mito dozed off. Naruto tucked her in his bed and kissed her head before walking out. He had to go and visit his brother before he went to the academy today. He walked out of the confines of his home, the rain still pouring heavily. His clothes were drenched and his hair dripping with raindrops. Those calm cerulean blue eyes gazed ahead while his feet took their time in reaching his destination. A small sad smile lit up his face as he saw the destination he was looking for come into view. Uchiha Memorial Grounds. Naruto walked through the several headstones to the one he wanted to visit. He stood in front of the one he was looking for with his hands tucked in his pockets. He couldn't help but think that Shisu should have been here today to see his progress at the academy. "You come here often?" a voice suddenly asked, making Naruto glance back a bit to see an equally drenched Sasuke there with a somber look on his face, unlike his stoic mask he tried to put on every day. "Yeah, I do. What about you?" he asked, though already knowing the answer. "Every day, it's where my family is. I have to come every day," he said simply, and the blonde nodded. They stood side by side enjoying the drizzle over them. "Namikaze?" the raven suddenly asked, making Naruto hum a little to show he was listening. "Fight me," he stated simply, making the blonde's eyebrow to rise. He saw the hard look on Sasuke's face and said nothing as the raven-haired boy started walking. He followed suit. If he wanted a fight, then who was he to say no to the boy? He himself wanted to cut loose a bit today too. Sasuke was the only one who came close to matching him in a fight. Both had mutual respect for each other's skills. He kept walking through the forests into some unknown clearing in the middle of nowhere when he saw the boy turn to him and nod. He looked around at the abandoned clearing and nodded back as both slid into their respective taijutsu stances. Sasuke was the one to make the first move. He launched forward and pumped his fist back, launching it for the blonde's nose. Naruto caught it easily in his palm and winced at the brute force the punch had in it. He tried to punch him in himself, but Sasuke caught it too, as both stared each other down while trying to overpower the other. Naruto knew he was the one who would lose in terms of strength, so he decided to change the tables a bit to his liking. He twisted his body while still in Sasuke's grip. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as the blonde moved almost as if they were dancing and was about to get him in a hold by his neck. He crouched down and let him go, while rolling away to get some distance. He let out a growl as he saw the blonde smirking from his retreat, but couldn't help but let out a smirk himself. "Can't keep up with my strength, Namikaze," he taunted, doing nothing to the smirking blonde but to amuse him even more. "You talk too much, Uchiha," he shouted, jumping high up in the sky and launched a flurry of shurikens over the unsuspecting Raven. Sasuke's eyes widened and he quickly took out a kunai to parry them away but got nicked by a couple of them. "You should keep your eyes on me," he heard a small whisper and whipped his head around, only to meet a fist to his cheek. He rolled backwards and slid to a stop, wiping the mud off his face and glared at the blonde heatedly. "Oh come on, Sasu-chan, you thought I would be taken down that easily? Who do you think you're fighting, one of your fangirls?" He mocked him and the Raven growled in anger. "Damn you," he shouted and threw shurikens himself. Naruto smirked at getting him riled up and flicked out his three-pronged kunais, batting away the flying stars with a practiced elegance. He crouched down as an arm passed above his head harmlessly and crossed his arms in front of him to block the kick that he saw coming. He was launched back a few feet in the mud, and let out an oomph when his back collided with a tree harshly. He coughed a wheezing breath and looked at the smirking Uchiha who was running towards him to hit him with the hilt of the kunai and knock him out. The Uchiha smirked as the blow made contact, though his eyes widened when the blonde disappeared in a puff of smoke. "Substitution," he exclaimed and felt a foot connect to his back and launch him face first into the same tree he had kicked the blonde in earlier. Naruto jumped up as the Raven swiped his feet to make him go down and back flipped a couple of times to gain some distance. "You are good, Sasuke, training hard I see." Naruto spoke in admiration for his opponent. "You're not bad yourself, Namikaze," Sasuke said in a rare moment of appreciation with a little smile. Both charged forward to the trees in front of them, keeping their eyes on the opponent running along their side and ran up the trees in opposite directions. Sasuke jumped off and launched another flurry of shurikens that Naruto saw coming a mile away and launched a counter-attack himself. The flying metal met with a clang and fell down harmlessly while Sasuke and Naruto took the tree's jumps to meet for kicks in midair. Both launched backwards and twisted to land on the bark of the tree for a spring jump and jumped back into the fray. Both traded blows, jumping in between the branches, chuckling every now and then at the giddiness they felt in the fight. It didn't matter why they were fighting now, the rain, mud and the pure rush of the battle had now taken over them. Sasuke decided to take it up a notch. "Snake, ram, monkey, boar, horse, tiger. Fire style, grand fireball jutsu," he exclaimed after running through hand seals. Naruto's Sharingan had activated during the last couple of minutes on instincts as he knew which jutsu was coming and prepared the counter for it himself. "Tiger, snake, rat, snake, tiger, bird. Water style, water wall," he exclaimed and spouted out water from his mouth to effectively counter the incoming inferno. Both attacks met in the hissed while Sasuke tried to overpower him and pumped in more chakra. Naruto kept going on to defend effectively and was panting under the strain. He hadn't mastered this jutsu yet completely. Both cancelled their jutsu out and fell to their knees in exhaustion. "Let's just call it a draw," Naruto said in pants, making Sasuke shake his head in refusal. "No, not yet," he answered and stood up on shaky legs. Naruto shook his head and stood up. Both glared at each other, and just as a drop of water dropped from Naruto's nose they were off with their fists cocked back for one final blow. "Naruto! Sasuke!" Both shouted in unison and launched their attacks. Naruto's fist met Sasuke's cheek and threw him back while Naruto stood on shaky legs and looked at his down opponent. Sasuke was gazing at the raining sky with a small serene smile on his face. He hadn't felt this light and nice ever since the massacre. "You win, Naruto, just this once," he whispered, making Naruto fall on his butt and lie down right by his side. He crossed his arms behind his head. He was glad that he had picked that defensive jutsu up from the old man. "Put a lid on it, I'm exhausted," Naruto said, making Sasuke smirk. He was exhausted himself. He really was the only one who pushed him this far. Naruto's ears perked up when he caught something strange coming from a little afar. "What's the matter?" Sasuke asked, but Naruto said nothing and just sat up. The raven looked lost as Naruto kept on gazing at a particular spot. "Sasuke, I'll see you at the academy, alright?" he said, and didn't bother for a reply as he started walking deeper into the forest. The Uchiha just shrugged and went back to his own home to get a change of clothes and something hot to drink. Naruto kept on following the strange sound that was bugging him and was getting into quite a deep part of the forest. Finally, he felt he was near the voice and his eyes widened when he saw the small cub, having his leg trapped underneath a boulder and crying for help. He ran forward and saw that it was a small bear cub with completely white fur. "Polar bear." He mused and crouched down by his side to see the frightened eyes of the cub land on him. He smiled at the cub for reassurance and scratched the back of his ear, making the cub purr softly and nuzzle in his hand. "Alright, now let's get you out," he said, and stuck his feet to the slippery ground with chakra and did the same with his hands to catch the boulder. Now he was cursing his earlier spar as he heaved in all his strength and pulled up while the cub mewled in pain and tried to wriggle off from the weight. "Come on, you damn rock," he roared in exertion and pumped his muscles full of chakra to lift the huge boulder up finally enough for the cub to get free. He let the boulder fall with a huge noise and saw the cub trying to lick his injured paw while whimpering in pain. He scooped the cub up in his arms while it just mewled and tried to pry off. Naruto just hugged him and held him gently to calm him down. "Should'll be alright, we'll get you fixed up in no time," he consoled the cub, who calmed down and curled up in his arms to take in the newfound warmth in the heavy downpour. Naruto jumped up onto a branch and expanded his senses to locate the way out from where he was. He started going through tree after tree at full speed and only now realized how deep he had come in. He reached the fence and jumped up with a single flip over it to the other side. He read the board on his run. "Forest of Death. Stupid name, I guess," he muttered to himself and ran off towards the village. He saw the bleeding paw of the cub and ran as fast as he could to get him patched up. Uzumaki Namikaze households. Kushina was preparing for breakfast while humming on her toes. She smiled seeing her daughter come down, who was looking at her expectantly, much to her confusion. "Ka-chan, where is Aniki?" she asked sleepily, making Kushina even more confused. "Naruto. Isn't he in his room?" she asked curiously, getting a shake of the head from her daughter. "No, I was sleeping there, and he wasn't there. Looks like he left early to train," she mumbled with a yawn, throwing Kushina in for a loop. It was raining quite heavily as she saw the storm outside and wondered if he was in some other room when she heard the main door being opened. She gasped as her eyes landed on the drenched form of her son, who looked like he had been scuba diving in his clothes. "Ka-chan, help him," he said pleadingly while holding out the cub in his arms. She saw the injured cub and nodded with a little smile, taking the adorable thing in her arms. "Come to the bathroom with me, Naru-chan," she said firmly while he nodded and followed her. She hadn't left any room for questions, that was for sure. He got in the bathroom and yelped as his t-shirt was yanked over his head suddenly. His teeth chattered and he shivered from the cold he felt suddenly. He felt a soft bonk on his head and looked at the stern face of his mother, who was holding a highly amused cub in her arms. He glared at the little traitor, who just purred as Kushina rubbed his head softly. "Now you see what you get for going out into a storm. What were you doing out anyways?" she asked as she sat him down in the tub and turned on the hot water shower, making him sigh in relief as the hot water sprayed over him. "I went to see Shisu," he whispered, making her fall silent and rub his hair, which rinsed off the heavy mud he had assimilated. "And how did you get so dirty or come across this little thing?" she asked, pointing to the cub that was trying cutely to get in the warm-looking water but slipping at the slippery tiles. Naruto smiled and picked him to take him in the water and chuckled as the cub dove nose deep in the water and purred happily. "I met Sasuke there, and we had a spar. Then I thought I heard something in the forest and followed the voice to him stuck beneath a boulder. I freed him and brought him home," he said as the cub latched himself on his shoulders like a little koala and licked his cheek happily, making him giggle happily. Kushina giggled herself while rinsing off the shampoo from his hair. "They give strange names to forests these days, Kat-chan," he mumbled, making her raise an eyebrow as she started lathering the cub in soap, who was mewling happily. "Really?" she asked curiously, and he nodded. "Hi, I found this little thing in a forest called the Forest of Death." "I mean, who names a forest that?" he asked, playing with the cub, not looking at the mortified face of his mother behind him. "You went into the Forest of Death?" she whispered, and he muttered a hi, and he played with the cub in the hot water. Now she could understand how he had gotten across to a polar bear of all things to come across. But she was pretty sure they didn't have those in there the last she had heard. "Naruto," she spoke firmly in a serious tone, making two pairs of innocent eyes turn to her, and she resisted the urge to yell kawaii and hug the two to death as the cub's chin rested over Naruto's head. "You will not go there again without adult supervision. Am I clear?" she asked, getting a nod, but a questioning look from the blonde. "That forest is used by our village to have survival training exercises to be taught to the Anbu Black Ops. The fact that a child, much less an academy student, went in and came out unscathed is shocking to say the least. Even Chunins think twice before going there," she said and sighed as she saw the two playing with bubbles in the tub and completely ignoring her again. "Naruto," she spoke, and got two innocent blinks from the two children in the tub. "Hi," he asked innocently, and the cub purred in unison, making her sigh in defeat. "What do you want to do with him?" she asked, pointing to the cub in his arms, and smiled when she saw him wrapping him up in his arms protectively. "I want to keep him. I'll take care of him, and he likes me, see?" he asked, and got a lick on his cheek from the cub, making her smile and nod. She had already figured as much. "All right, I'll talk to the Hokage tomorrow since he was found in the Forest of Death. If he agrees, you can keep him, but you'll have to take great care of." She trailed off as she got two wet hugs. One from her son and the other from the cub, who had jumped in her arms happily. "Oh, you two are ruining my clothes," she gushed and yelped when she was pulled into the tub abruptly. She saw the laughing form of her son and the cub, who was wagging his little tail happily, and her eyes softened as she too giggled, and a round of water splashing started in the bathroom. A few moments later, a dried-up Naruto sat on the table with the cub sleeping and softly purring on his lap, while Mito was stealing glances at the cute little thing. Kushina put down the food on the table and told them all about the new possible member of their family. "Aniki, you should name him," Mito squealed in delight, making Kushina giggle and Naruto smile. "He should name her, since it was a female cub." I guess I'll name her Akira then," he said, and saw the happy-looking cub, who mewled and wagged his tail in approval, making Kushina giggle all the more. "I swear she is more of a mixture of a dog and a cat than a polar bear," she giggled, and they all shared a laugh at the cub's expense, who purred happily and snuggled in his new master's embrace. They were all startled when a puff of smoke appeared in the room, and Naruto and his siblings had their kunais drawn, while Kushina stood in front of them protectively with her chains now protruding from her back. The smoke cleared to reveal the form of a polar bear that came to about Kushina's shoulders in height and was wearing a golden armor over him. He looked really old, but they were all shocked beyond belief when the bear spoke up. "So that is where you ran off to? I had them search the entire lands of polar bears, but couldn't find a trace. How she came across a reverse summoning seal is beyond me," the bear said with a tired sigh, and blinked as he saw the defensive humans in front of him and came to his surroundings of a house. His eyes then landed on the cub in Naruto's arms, who mewled happily at seeing the old bear. Naruto looked down at the cub in his arms and moved a couple of steps to the new bear as the old bear sniffed and licked the cub, who purred happily. "You're a summon?" Kushina asked, making the old bear look at her and smile slightly with a nod. "Why, yes, young lady, I am Eoric, the elder of the great polar bear clan. And this little thing belongs to our realms but has wandered off here, Kami knows how," he said, and looked on curiously when Naruto had her in a protective hug. He felt a hand on his shoulder and looked on at the sad smile of his mother. Naru-chan, she's a summoning animal. She will have to be returned. She trailed off when he wriggled off her grip and stood back defiantly. I don't care. Akira's staying with me, and that's that, even if I have to fight him for it, he said firmly, looking at the old bear with narrowed eyes. Well, I rarely ever see such fiery young cubs these days, and I must say he is quite courageous, the bear said, while Kushina watched her son glare at the bear heatedly with a little nervousness. The bear must be strong if it was an elder of his clan, since she knew the strongest of the summons were elder summons. She watched the bear take steps towards Naruto and stiffened while Naruto's Sharingan blazed to life and he flared his chakra, doing nothing to faze the bear in the slightest. Tell me, young cub, why are you so protective of her? He asked curiously and took another sniff from Naruto, who brushed the cub's hair gently. I rescues her and she's my responsibility now. She's staying with me and I'm not taking no for an answer, he said in a firm tone, leaving no room for arguments. Kushina watched on with a bitten lip, knowing she could be in for a fight with a strong summon any moment now. Her son really was reckless when he wanted something, and he wasn't letting her go. Very interesting indeed, young one. But I'm afraid we cannot let a cub from our land stay in your world for too long, if that person isn't our summoner, he said with a smirk, making Kushina's eyes go wide in shock at his sly suggestion. Naruto, though, wasn't seeing his point and was getting ready to defend himself as he spun his kunai by the ring and held it in front of him. So how do you want to do it? He asked defensively, making the bear smirk in amusement. Kushina wanted to beat his head with a broom right now as she face-palmed. Well, I guess you'll have to become the personal summoner of Akira now. I'll place a special personal summoning seal on your arm, which will bond you two for life, and you just need to smear your blood over it to summon her anywhere, he said, making Naruto's eyes go wide in surprise before he grinned foxily and nodded. Are you making him your summoner? Asked Kushina in a stunned voice while the bear shook his head. No, we shall see if he is worthy enough or not, and I'll have to talk to the clan before it. We haven't had a single summoner in all our years since we don't trust humans. But seeing as how this little one adores him, we'll see if it could be changed in the future, he said, getting a nod from Kushina. Hold out your hand, young cub, he said, walking up to Naruto, who looked at his mother and she nodded. He held his left arm out when, much to his shock, the bear bit onto it gently and he winced in pain. He could feel his arm burn and saw a strange black marking spread onto his forearm in the shape of a roaring bear around the place he had bitten onto. There is your seal, young cub, and we shall see what ties you'll have with my clan in the future, if any. For now you can keep our cub. I hope you'll keep her safe, he asked, getting a nod from Naruto. Yeah, count on it, he said, making the bear nod before he puffed out of existence and returned to the summoning realm. Kushina still couldn't believe it. Her son had gone out this morning, saved a cub and become a summoner. He really did have the devil's luck, she mused and smiled as she watched him play with the cub happily. Chapter 14. Time skip 6 years later. Konoha no Sato. Hokage Tower. Hokage Office. It had been 6 long years, and the time for the batch of academy prospects to graduate was upon them. Hiruzen puffed on his pipe, looking at the various files lying in front of him. This was the hardest thing he admitted to doing every year. Selecting genin teams for graduates. A balanced team where each member would be beneficial to the other, how their teamwork would let them come on top of their own individual weaknesses. These teams would be together for years to come and would most likely shape their futures, in short. He sighed. He was getting too old for all this. His eyes darted towards the door that opened. He let out a puff, watching several jounins file in the room. He decided the teams ultimately, but the jounins did request their subordinates personally or suggested him teams. It was how it had always worked for them. He saw his son straightaway going for 3 files and tossing them in front of him. I request Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi for my genin squad, he murmured, puffing on a cigarette himself. Many murmurs ran across the room saying he had picked out the golden squad already. The Inoshika Cho trio? The Hokage murmured deep in thought and Asuma gave a curt nod. Their fathers had surely been a menace and were the strongest squad the village had when they were active. Maybe he could recreate the success of the previous generation with them. He glanced at his son from underneath his hat and the small smirk plastered on his face. He wanted them badly and Hiruzen knew he would make fine shinobi out of them. He gave one final puff before nodding and picking up the files. He handed the 3 files to Asuma who smiled widely. Very well, Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi will be under the command of Asuma Sarutobi. Study their files carefully and pick them up tomorrow for their test. He barked in his Hokage voice. Asuma nodded, tucking the 3 files under his arm and watched on the proceedings curiously. Hiruzen watched the newest of all the jounins, Kurena Yui, stepping forward to the table laden full of prospective candidates' files. She bristled through them one after the other and finally picked 3 out, handing them to the old man. Kiba Inuzuka, Shinoa Barame and Hinata Hyuga? He murmured, glancing and opening the 3 files up. He went into deep thought and glanced at the kunoichi who was looking at him with a smile. Any particular reasons for these 3? He asked, though saw the potential tracker and retrieval team she was trying to create. Hinata with her Byakugan scouting out enemies, Kiba being the natural tracker with his Inuzuka clan's abilities and Shino with his insects for capture through a distance or for distractions. I wish to make a tracker team from them, Lord Third. She said politely, getting a nod in return. He had already figured as much. But would the team fit? Kiba, the brash and proud Inuzuka, Shino, the quiet and logically, seeing a Barame distanced from everyone else, and Hinata, the shy and compassionate kunoichi who was almost too nice to even think of hurting someone's feelings. He hummed, thinking about granting her the squad of her choice or not. Kiba and Shino might fit, the Inuzuka playing leader with his pride and alpha male personality and Shino letting him have his space being the logical one he was. But where did Hinata fit in? She was too quiet and shy for her own good, though had the most potential out of almost all the fresh kunoichis and the revered Byakugan with her. Kurena saw his apprehension and decided to say something. What wrong, Lord Hokage? She asked nervously, making his serious eyes turn to her. He said nothing and let out a puff of smoke, still in deep thought. All of their thoughts were broken when the door to the chambers opened abruptly and in walked a silver-haired jounin, reading the infamous orange book. He saw all eyes on him. I smiled with his lone visible eye. Well, you see, I thought I saw something shiny in the sky and decided to follow it, thinking it was an alien ship, but in the end, it turned out to be a balloon. He said lazily, pulling out a silver balloon from behind him. Hiruzen chuckled wholeheartedly at Kakashi's antics. The man always did have a theme for theatrics when it came to excuses. The other jounins watched him incredulously with pin-drop silence until Asuma spoke up. That really is shiny. He murmured, getting even more incredulous stares, and shrugged nonchalantly. Kakashi strolled down to the front and Hiruzen watched with narrowed eyes when his best elite jounin started rummaging through files. All the jounins were watching intently. Kakashi never wanted a team, so it was a surprise when he himself was actively taking a part in choosing a team for himself. Hiruzen smiled. Maybe he might pass a squad this year as he watched the man's childlike enthusiasm when he searched for it. Hiruzen saw him go through files, but knew it was all an act. The man knew what he wanted, but was purposefully wasting his time. But he couldn't say the suspense wasn't exciting. His eyes lingered on Kakashi's hands as he handed him 2 files, and he instantly opened the thread over them and flipped them open. Almost every head in the room leaned in and broke into a fit of murmurs and whispers at seeing who he had picked out. Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Namikaze. Hiruzen spoke aloud and went into another round of deep thoughts. The 2 top boys of the year and rivals. It was no news to Hiruzen that the 2 would do fine on a team. Sasuke only respected strength and Naruto was the only boy he knew who kept beating him in each of his challenges with ease. They held a mutual respect for each other and pushed each other further to keep up with the other. The idea seemed quite possible now. He looked up at the lazy jounin and ignored all the curious stares of the people wondering if he would grant his request of putting the two strongest genins together. "What about the kunoichi of your squad?" he asked, and all eyes rested on Kakashi, who once again looked at the files on the table and frowned. "Ah," he said happily as his eyes rested on the three open files underneath his own, and a small picture of indigo hair caught his eye. He smiled and reached for it and threw it with the other two, making Hiruzen raise an eyebrow. Kirena's eyes widened in shock as Hiruzen spoke the name of his third requested charge. "Hinata Hyuga," he said, and glanced at Kirena, who was outright glaring at the lone-eyed man. "I have already requested her for my squad." She bristled angrily, making Kakashi glance at her a bit before looking back at Hiruzen, who was scrutinizing him quite intently. "Oh," he spoke in amusement, causing the glare to intensify, but ignored it. His eyes glanced at the two open files from where he had picked it up from. He looked back at Hiruzen, who was now just leaning back in his seat and watching the bickering start in pure curiosity. "Have you approved it then, Sandaime?" the lazy jounin asked, making Hiruzen smirk ever so slightly before shaking his head in negative. Kakashi's eye turned to the furiously glaring red-eyed jounin, and he smiled. "Then I guess I could request her. She would be perfect for my squad, Kirena," he said in his usual lazy voice, making her bristle in anger and glare at him as he tried to break her perfect squad. "No, she would be perfect under my squad and tutelage, Lord Hokage. I will help her sort out her confidence issues, and her Byakugan would be invaluable to my team. She doesn't fit in Kakashi's ridiculously put-together squad at all." She protested heatedly at the thought of losing the girl she cared so much about. The Hokage hummed and turned his eyes to the lone-eyed jounin, who was reading his book calmly. "How would Hinata work it out on your squad, Kakashi? Kirena's selections do show merits," he said, giving him a chance. He himself agreed with Kirena. The girl might become a third wheel and become sidetracked with the two heavily strong boys. And her meek and shy nature might put her aside even more and make her an outcast. He would have denied had any other jounin asked for her with these two, but since it was Kakashi, he would give the man a chance to point out his reasons. Kirena smirked and looked at Kakashi, who in a rare occurrence closed his book with a snap and looked at the Hokage seriously. "She will be perfect, Hokage-sama. With Sasuke and Naruto being highly proficient in ninjutsu and taijutsu with mid to close range capabilities, she could become a perfect addition to my team," he said ever so calmly, making Hiruzen raise an eyebrow. "Oh, how so?" he asked curiously and leaned forward with his chin over his crossed fingers. "She is excellent in taijutsu but shows her deep interest to be a medical ninja. She has been creating bombs and healing ointments from a young age, and even took some of the healing classes that were given at the academy as her extra skill," he said, and got a small nod from Hiruzen. "A Hyuga, and that too as a medic, would be quite the sight to behold. The combat medics usually weren't trained for combat too much, but a Hyuga could accomplish quite a lot, given their enemies would think twice of charging them head-on, and her Byakugan coupled with healing abilities would make even Tsunade drool at having her as an apprentice, though it would be a cold day in hell when she took on another apprentice." He hummed in thought while Kirena was suddenly nervous and cursing the silver-haired jounin. "She wouldn't fit in Lord Third. Those two are leaps and bounds above her in their skills, and would think she would just hold them back. She might become an outcast." She was cut off by the nonchalant voice of Kakashi. "She has deep feelings for Naruto and he returns them. He cares a lot for the girl. I don't think being an outcast would be a problem," he said, making her fall silent and curse him even more. Hiruzen took note of the point in favor of Kakashi and was now seriously considering his suggestion and approved the squad. What about Sasuke then? He would no doubt look down upon her shy and kind nature. His attitude is too dark for her, she argued, making Kakashi smile in that infuriating manner she hated so much. Sasuke hates one thing more than a shy and kind girl: a fangirl. If you were to take Hinata, I would have to make do with Sakura, who is infatuated with the boy. You, on the other hand, being a kunoichi, might help her break away out of those obsessive natures. Hinata will be fine with me, plus Naruto will make her confidence soar like always," he said, and she gritted her teeth at the losing battle she was fighting. The small smile on Hiruzen's face was proof enough he was considering this suggestion heavily. Plus, Sakura has perfect chakra control, I might add, and you might have a potential genjutsu mistress in your hands, and she might even pick up a sensory technique to help your squad even more. With Hinata, my heavy assault team will be complete. It's a win-win for the both of us, Kurena-chan. He chirped happily, and she glared at the way he had called her, but said nothing. As much as she loathed to admit it, he did have some good points there. "I have made my decision," rang the calm voice of Hiruzen as he closed and handed the 3 files to the eye-smiling Jounin. "Kakashi, you have your squad, make them a fine team. They have the greatest potential out of all the squads this year. I place my faith in your hands," he said, and Kakashi nodded, absolutely delighted with a wonderful squad in his hands. Hiruzen handed Kurena her 2 requested files and added Sakura Haruno's file to it. He would have placed Sasuke with him, without a doubt, and Naruto's presence with Kakashi would help in assuring there was always a proficient Sharingan user with him if he ever lost control. "Kurena, your squad too is quite a balanced one if you work with them nicely. I expect quite a lot out of them," he said in his ever-calm tone, and she nodded with a small sad smile. Even if she hadn't gotten the girl she considered a little sister, she had 2 of her choices approved, and the third, Kunoichi, had a potential for genjutsu. Maybe it wasn't so bad. "What about the Uzumaki twins?" asked Genma, making Hiruzen nod, already expecting the question for a while now. All eyes sat on him now. "Menma and Mito Uzumaki have been put onto a squad and assigned a special sensei after a long discussion between me, Jiraiya, and Kushina. You all don't need to worry about it," he said in a tone of finality, and everyone decided to end the topic then and there. They knew the man wasn't in the mood to answer any other questions, and they started going through the rest of the files. Meanwhile, at the Konoha Academy, Naruto, dressed in a plain black shirt and black pants, as were all the other students in their final year for their medical evaluations before they graduated tomorrow, was in a silent hallway in the academy. He had some time before the next evaluation and ran his hand softly along the slim waist of the girl he was holding. Hinata, like Naruto, dressed in a black shirt and a thigh-length black skirt, while she had her back against the wall and her arms around his neck. She gazed down, not being able to look him in the eyes from the shyness she felt. Naruto brought a finger under her chin and raised her gaze to meet his own. She blushed prettily as her shy and shimmering lavender pearls met those soul-piercing azure blue eyes that held a calm storm in them. Her blush increased when she saw the small confident smirk on his face, and she averted her eyes to the side shyly. Her lower lip bitten softly through the left side, making her almost irresistibly cute in his eyes. He leaned down, his own lips brushing against her soft pink ones, which opened slightly, and her breath tickled his own lips. "Do I scare you, Hin?" he asked, making her lick her lip unconsciously as his breath tickled her lips, and she puckered them slightly. She knew he was always scared that he intimidated her in such positions, but she never felt scared of him. She could never feel scared of him. His dominating position made her feel all the more safe in his arms. "No," she whispered breathlessly, her cheeks adorning the pink blush from the way her affectionate nickname that he used when only the 2 of them were there slipped so smoothly of his lips. "Really?" he asked in a whisper, making her breath hitch at the proximity and how his hand slid slowly under her shirt and ran along the sides of her waist. Her nervous lavender pearls gazed into those fiery blue eyes she loved so much. "Really?" she whispered firmly, making him smirk slightly. His lips pressed on her soft pink ones, and she too pressed them back. He closed the distance between their bodies by pulling her waist closer, and his hands ran underneath her shirt across her back. She let out a soft moan in their lip lock, and her arms tightened around his neck. He completely dominated her and kissed her softly yet lovingly on her lips. He broke the kiss off softly, much to her disappointment, but he gave her no time to breathe as he kissed her jawline ever so softly again. Her head craned back, giving him complete access, and he attacked her vulnerable neck. Soft butterfly kisses ran along her sensitive skin down to her collarbone. She let out yet another soft moan and ran her fingers through his hair. Those silky blonde locks she loved so much. Her breath hitched slightly when she felt his hands on her stomach, making her way up, and she shivered in nervousness. "Naru," she said shakily in a moan, making his hand stop and pull out while holding her waist. Her shaky soft voice was enough to make him stop from doing anything she wasn't comfortable with. He put his forehead against hers and gazed into those shy eyes he loved so much. "I love you, Hin," he said simply, as if it was truest thing to him in the world. She smiled softly and her cheeks burned red, but she looked back into his eyes with such love, it made his own stomach have butterflies. "I love you, Naru," she whispered, the words almost rolling off her tongue, and the smile he graced her with made her heart flutter. He only smiled that softly and lovingly when they were in their moments, and all alone. His hand brushed her hair tied up in a high ponytail, now coming to her mid-waist. He pulled her face into his neck and she snuggled in his arms quickly. His nose nuzzling her neck and taking in the sweet vanilla scent he loved so much. "You smell so lovely, Hen," he whispered, making her blush in embarrassment and hug him tightly. He smiled, feeling her embarrassment clearly rolling off of her. He felt her kiss his neck with her supple lips softly and smiled, holding her soft form in his arms gently. The two had gotten almost inseparable over the years. His 5 minutes 4 seconds form, holding her almost 5 form in his arms. His soft teasing and ever-soft gestures had slowly turned into these intimate kisses and positions he sometimes pulled her in, and much to his and her own surprise she never pushed him away. Whenever he asked her why, the answer was the same. "I can never push you away," was what he always got, and it made him smile every time at the faith she held in him. She was still the same shy mess when it came to him, but she had gained a lot of confidence around others. No longer did she stutter with others. Though with him, it was there, albeit only sometimes now. Her body was also starting to develop as she grew. Her chest now becups drew the attention of several boys their age, but no one ever got close. His fiery glares were enough to send them on their way. "We should get to class," she whispered, giving his cheek a kiss, and he smiled, feeling it through his sensitive whiskers. "Let me hold you a little longer," he whispered back, hearing footsteps across the next hallway, but ignored it. She giggled softly and nuzzled her nose with his softly. "What am I going to do with you?" she asked in her soft melodic voice, and he smiled, cupping her pink cheek in his palm. "Anything you would like to do," he whispered, making her cheeks burn red from his words. He chuckled softly when he felt her hit his chest and muttered "Baka." She broke the hug gently and caught his hand in her own with a small giggle. "Now come on, let's go," she said happily, and he smiled and allowed himself to be dragged along the hallways with the giggling girl. They reached their class while Hinata slid the door open, getting almost all eyes on them. "Gomen Uruka Sensei, we didn't mean to be late," she said softly with a polite bow. The instructor smiled though, eyed her holding hands with the blonde, and nodded. He watched her pull him with her to the back row and went back to his charts of medical evaluations. This had become a common occurrence through the years. At least she kept the lazy blonde a bit in line, and from what he knew their parents were well aware of their close friendship. Kiba watched the Hyuga heiress with a bright smile and that adorable pink blush, holding hands with the Namikaze, and couldn't help but writhe in jealousy. She had caught his attention when she had let her hair grow, and almost all the male population of the academy too had started noticing her rising confidence and skills. She wasn't like the fangirls in the academy. She took her training seriously but had her eyes set on the blonde who reciprocated her feelings fully. They were the cutest couple in the academy according to the girls. He watched the two bangs framing her face waving and how she giggled softly, pulling Naruto along with her. He too wanted to be friends with her, but it was almost as if she didn't even see him when she was with him. And much to his chagrin, she always seemed to be with him. Menma watched his brother walk beside him and just ignored him, and Naruto didn't let his gaze linger on too long too. Everything had gone wrong just as Maito had feared at the showcase in front of their parents all those years ago. though the circumstances were nowhere near what she had expected. Flashback. All the parents and guardians were standing in the grounds of the academy for the showcase their children were going to give today. Everyone could see the excitement on their faces, even the ever-stoic Hayashi was smiling ever so slightly for seeing his daughter. Naruto sat by Hinata, his arm around her waist, holding her gently with Sasuke sitting on his other side. They watched Iruka, who was calling the names of several students. Hinata, Hyuga, and Ino Yamanaka. He called out and Naruto smiled. He gave her a soft squeeze and nuzzled his cheek on her head, making her blush. Go on and show them, Hina-chan. He whispered in her ear, making her blush slightly and nod. She stepped in the ring with Ino, who had a smug smile on her face. Ha, I get the shy girl. At least I'll get to show Sasuke-kun how better I am than Billboard Brow over there, she said, smugly ignoring the cry of protest from Sakura. Iruka sighed and just waved his hand in front of them. Hajime. His voice rang out and Ino dropped into her stance. Her eyes widened when she saw Hinata had rushed her and was almost by her side with her palm going for her stomach. It made contact and Ino felt the wind knocked out of her stomach. She was launched back and out of the ring like a rag doll. Choji poked her softly and shook his head at Iruka. She was out cold. Shasha, Hinata, Hyuga. He called out, getting an applause from the crowd. Inoichi was rubbing his forehead from the shame he felt not only at the fight, but his daughter's attitude. How had he let her become a fangirl? Was what he was asking himself. He was going to have a long talk with his wife if he had anything to say about it. Hayashi was smiling like an idiot and bursting with pride. His daughter had destroyed the Yamanaka heiress in one blow. That was how a Hyuga struck. He glanced to the side when an elbow poked his stomach and saw the bubbly red-headed mother smiling too. Aren't they adorable? She squealed softly, making him quite confused. Though he saw Naruto hug his daughter and congratulating her, all the while she was blushing and stuttering her thanks. His lips pursed and he went into deep thought for a moment. Well, he is Minato's son and the Namikaze heir. At least she isn't associating herself with someone not of her own standing, and he is quite skilled too. He thought and nodded at the Uzumaki clan head curtly. Yes, they do make quite a sight to behold, he said stoically, making Kushina smile. She was happy that Naruto was friends with Hinata and from what it looked like Sasuke too, as she saw him put the boy in a headlock much to his protests. Menma Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha, called out Iruka, drawing her attention towards the ring, and she smiled seeing her son enter the ring. Menma was grinning, this was perfect. Sasuke was the best after his brother in all the academy, and he could show everyone how much he had grown. Sasuke though entered with his usual stoic expression, and entered the Uchiha clan's Interceptor Fists Taijutsu stance. Today I'll show everyone I am the best, exclaimed Menma, getting cheers from many girls, and Sasuke just smirked at the challenge. Let's see if you are anything like Naruto. This might be fun, he said with a smirk, making Menma's smile turn down, and he fell into his own Uzumaki Taijutsu stance. Hajime, rang the voice of Iruka, and Menma was off in an instant with a right hook to knock Sasuke out cold. Sasuke brought his arm up and blocked the swing, punching the redhead in his gut and launched him back. Menma skid backwards and coughed, feeling the rock-hard punch he had just endured, and glared at the Uchiha. Sasuke took the initiative and jumped up, twisting himself for a roundhouse kick, which Menma ducked under. He flipped in mid-air and brought his other heel down, making Menma slide back to avoid it barely. Sasuke though didn't let up the push and swiped his leg in a horizontal arc along the ground to take his feet from underneath him. Menma tried to jump up, but was met with an elbow to his chest and thrown backwards in free fall. He watched down in a wheezing cough, holding his gut where he had been stuck to see the ring's rope, and his eyes widened as he saw the Uchiha stand up, looking down at him. Shasha Sasuke Uchiha. Iruka's voice rang out, and the stunned silence of the crowd was broken by Sasuke's fangirls who cheered for him. HN. This was disappointing. You are nowhere near Namikaze. Guess there really is nothing alike about you and him, even your surnames are different. This was a waste of time. he said in annoyance and walked back to his seat to a slightly frowning Naruto. Menma clutched the dirt in his fist and clenched his eyes in agony, giving a hateful glare towards Sasuke and Naruto who was sitting beside him. He felt like a joke in front of everyone and walked back to let the matches continue. His mother looked at him with a small sad smile and nodded for confidence, and he nodded back to assure her it was all right. You didn't have to say that, Uchiha, Naruto said, making Sasuke huff. It was the truth. He is nowhere near your or my level for that matter. I won't mince my words just to make him feel better. He's weak, and that's the truth, he said in an irritated tone, making Naruto sigh. It was true that Sasuke never minced his words, no matter how cruel they may sound to everyone, but as he saw the sad expression on Mito's face, he sighed. There was nothing he could do now. He heard his name being called out, along with Kiba, and decided not to prolong it. He wasn't in the mood to play around. His eyes turned to Tobirama, who was sitting on the edge of the roof. The white-haired man nodded, and he nodded back with a smile. I'll wipe the floor with you, Naruto, exclaimed the boisterous Inuzuka, and he said nothing, just stood in his stance. The spar was short, and he absolutely destroyed Kiba and threw him out the ring quite pathetically without even breaking a sweat. That my Naru-chan, Kushina chirped happily, making him blush a bit and rub his neck in embarrassment. It served to egg her on even more, and she embarrassed him further. Menma watched his mother cheer for him in jealousy when he was the one who wanted to be in his place. He glared at him heatedly, but the blonde was oblivious to it all and sat back with Hinata and Sasuke bumping his fists with the Uchiha. End of flashback. That was when the rift had formed in their relationship, and Menma started ignoring him and training harder than ever. He had maintained his place at the top of the academy quite easily. He sat down by the window and Hinata sat beside him, glancing at him every now and then and blushing when she saw his cheek on his palm while he was staring at her. She nudged his shoulder to stop his staring, but he caught her hand with his own free hand, making her look at him innocently with a blush. He brought her hand to his face and pressed his lips on the back of it, making her turn crimson. She pulled it back and slapped her hands on her cheeks while looking at her lap. He chuckled and ran his finger on her arm softly, making her squirm from his teasing touch. No need to be embarrassed, Hina-chan, he said softly, making her smile softly herself, but it didn't do anything to make her redness go away. She caught his hand and entwined her fingers with his own to stop him. He gave it a squeeze, feeling her small hand in his strong grip, and she tried to concentrate on Uruka and look into those intense azure eyes. Alright, you all can go. Tomorrow you will be here for your graduation exams and team placements, rang the voice of Uruka as he stepped out, and everyone broke down in a chatter. Naruto saw her nervous eyes and pulled her closer by her slim waist. She eeped softly, much to his amusement, but he put her head on his shoulder and she sighed tiredly. What's the matter, Hin? He asked in a whisper only audible to her, and she smiled. He could always tell whenever she was troubled. I want to be in the same team as you, she said, looking at him, and he smiled and nodded. He tucked a loose lock behind her ear, making her shy away cutely, and rubbed her cheek affectionately. We will be, just you see, he said firmly, making her smile. He was so confident. She could feel as if she could take on the world if her was by her side. What if we aren't? She asked sadly, looking at her lap with a bitten lip. His finger rose her chin and he kissed her cheek, making her blush prettily and look at him innocently. Even then we'll be together. Forever, remember? He asked, and she nodded with a soft smile. Forever, she whispered back as they stood up and walked back to their homes to get some rest for their next day. Chapter 15. Next morning. Senju clan compounds. There was a calm silence in the residence of Tobirama Senju this fine morning. He had let his disciple have a week off from training before the time for his graduation came. Only now did he see how accustomed he had gotten to the presence of that little blonde blur that had grown so much over the past years right before his very eyes. He sighed in nostalgia, and a smile full of pride burst upon his face when he thought about his student. He had really grown at a speed he hadn't thought possible in almost all the branches he had touched. The boy was pure gold when it came to learning the shinobi arts. The natural potential for them that all ukas held couldn't even begin to compare to what the blonde held within him. And he had exploited it to the fullest. He could easily say that amongst all the students he had taken on in terms of pure skill and learning abilities, he had thrashed each of his previous ones in terms of the skill he held at so young an age. And that was saying something, since that list included the current Hokage who was a prodigy himself in his younger days. His hands brushed the paper on the scroll in slow yet refined strokes to hone his calligraphy abilities. His senses tingled when he felt a person walking slowly and calmly to the glass door in front of him. He paid it no heed and went about the scroll in front of him, that same stupid smile that he just couldn't shake off no matter how hard he tried. "Thinking about your apprentice again, Tobirama-sama," came the lazy voice from in front of him as the glass door slid open. His eyes finally glanced up to see the copy ninja, making his way in with his casual lazy walk, reminding him of the same person he was thinking of. "Indeed," he said stoically, making the Jounin eye smile and take a seat when Tobirama motioned him for one. The white-haired Kage poured some tea in 2 cups and offered it to him, which Kakashi just kept in front of him. "So what brings you by to my residence?" asked Tobirama quite bluntly, making that same smile return to Kakashi's face. The man never minced his words and was always straight to the point. He respected that about him. "Came to talk to you about Naruto," he replied in his lazy voice, making the stroke of his brush halt halfway. His guarded eyes glanced up, making the Jounin shudder at the pure power he held in them and the protectiveness radiating off of him suddenly. The steel in his voice was unparalleled. "What is there to talk about him?" he asked stoically, though Kakashi could see how he had ordered him to answer it. "I've been assigned as his Jounin sensei. I've read through his file from the academy and there are just simple skills along with a couple of surprising things and his behavior with other students," he said in his lazy yet serious voice. Tobirama stared into his eyes blankly, making Kakashi squirm like a child under his gaze, before he gave a curt nod, making him stiffen. "I see," stated the Senju, and Kakashi breathed a sigh of relief when he picked his cup and took a sip of his steaming tea. "What does the file say, if I might ask?" he stated, making the Jounin nod and think for a few moments. "Rookie of the Year, shows great potential in nin and taijutsu and can expel almost every genjutsu in the academy as if it was nothing. Knows a couple of high-ranking ninjutsu including the Shadow Clone Jutsu and surprisingly the Uchiha clan's Fireball Jutsu. Shows potential to be a really strong shinobi one day," he said, almost listing them effortlessly, and Tobirama hummed in approval. A ghost of a smirk swiped across his lips that didn't go unnoticed by the lone-eyed Jounin. Tobirama would have outright laughed had he not known how much the blonde had really shown in the academy. That didn't even scratch the surface of what the boy was capable of. "You don't believe it?" he asked, making Kakashi eye smile. "I don't think a student who has been under your eyes for 9 whole years would be capable of just that," he said simply, making Tobirama smirk and nod. The cup made contact with the table, and he looked straight into his eyes. Sarutobi chose his instructor wisely, he stated, making Kakashi swell in pride. But he was going a bit wrong in his assumptions. "He didn't choose me, I requested the boy," he said, making him raise an eyebrow. "I've known the boy for quite some time now, be it watching over him when he was little or at the small visits I made at his house. A nice kid to have as my charge if I do say so myself," he said, making Tobirama smile and nod. It was all the more better. He decided to amuse the man and let him in on a few of the boy's abilities. "He's fast," he said simply, making Kakashi tilt his head to the side in confusion. "I'm sorry?" he asked in a lost voice, making the Senju sigh. He never did like repeating himself. "Naruto, he's fast," he said, making Kakashi nod. The man was hailed as the fastest shinobi alive when he was in his prime, and the blonde's father held that title for quite some time too. So he assumed it was only natural the boy was fast. He is quite the troublemaker, so I assume he would be fast since only Uruka is able to catch him if we don't take Kushina-sama and you under the list," he said in deep thought when he met Tobirama's eyes, and shuddered at the seriousness in them. "Don't take my disciple lightly, Kakashi. I've nurtured the boy with my own 2 hands and I know what he is capable of. That file doesn't even scratch the surface of what he is capable of if he ever goes all out," he stated blankly, and Kakashi gave a hesitant nod. He would remember to take him seriously in his test tomorrow then. He doesn't trust anyone quickly, so be sure not to be too imposing on him. He hates being felt like he is being weighed or chained down even in the slightest," he said, and Kakashi nodded, keeping it in his memory for the future. He really should have taken the time to get to know the boy when he was little, he thought when Tobirama's voice cut his thoughts. He is my legacy, I couldn't be prouder to have taught the boy so much. No matter the path he decides to take, he is the son I never had," Tobirama said in a faraway voice, making Kakashi's eyes soften at the man. He hadn't seen him let down his guard down so much ever. "You really do care for him," he said softly, making Tobirama snap out of his stupor and nod. Tobirama placed his hand on the middle of the table and pumped chakra into the small seal over it. The whole room was covered in kanji which glowed before disappearing. Kakashi suddenly turned serious at the privacy seal's activation and was giving the man his full attention. "The boy has a secret that I think I could trust you with since you will be teaching him and be with him on missions," stated the Senju clan head, and got a nod from Kakashi. Tobirama sat silently for a few moments before he spoke up. "He has sharp eyes," he said cryptically, making Kakashi narrow his eyes at the man. "I know Kushina-sama always says how he takes in every little detail minus," he was cut off by Tobirama's voice. "As sharp as your left eye," he said, and Kakashi's lone eye widened in shock and his jaw dropped behind his mask. Realization dawned on him as his stomach dropped a couple of pounds of weight instantly. How?" he stuttered, making Tobirama shake his head slowly. "That is a story for another time. This is why I said Hiruzen chose his instructor wisely," he said, getting a shaky nod from the silver-haired jounin. No wonder the boy picked things up quickly, he had the legendary Uchiha clan's blood in his veins. They must have kept it hidden to keep the wolves away from him, he surmised instantly. He stood up when Tobirama deactivated the seal and made his way towards the exit before Tobirama called for him. Kakashi he started making the man glance at him curiously when he saw the man gazing at the half-filled cup and not looking at him. "Take care of him, all right? He's a nice kid," he said in a rare soft tone, making the jounin nod and I smile. "I will," he said simply and walked out, having gathered enough data about the boy to make sure he had his guard up when he would test the 3 tomorrow. He shivered when he thought of the chaos the news would make when the boy's secret would be unveiled and that Konoha had not 1 but 2 Uchiha blood members. He still had many questions, but he would find the answers to them in due time. Tobirama sat in silence, knowing the boy had enough skills to take care of himself and would get the needed experience, now that he would go out and see the world for what it truly was. He smiled and shook his head when he thought how he was acting like a doting parent, knowing the boy was strong enough to take care of himself. He sighed, thinking he really was getting old. Meanwhile, at the Hyuga clan compounds, Hinata let out a cute yawn and sat up in her futon. She rubbed her eyes, glancing at the clock to see she was up quite early, and smiled. She was really excited and nervous for the day. She freshened up and remembered today all of them were going to become shinobi and change their attires completely. Her cheeks turned pink when she wondered what Naruto would be wearing. She shook her head and rushed into the bathroom for a shower to let out all the thoughts that were creeping into her mind about her adorable blonde. She stepped out of the steaming bathroom, clad in only a towel around her, and went for the closet. She took out her new clothes, letting the towel drop, and put on her undergarments. She picked up the fishnet bodysuit and put it on, her eyes turning to the white battle kimono placed on the dresser. Her face lit up and she picked it up before putting it on and tied the lavender sash around her waist. Her loose sleeves felt so nice. She tied the lavender ribbon to tie up her hair in her usual high ponytail. She went in front of the mirror and twirled with a giggle. Her thigh-length kimono had a small floral pattern in a matching shade to her ribbon, and she liked her new look. She put her finger on her chin and went into thought. She wondered what her Naruto would think. She blushed knowing she always referred to him as her Naruto nowadays. Not that he minded in the least. "What are you doing, Ne-sama?" asked a voice from behind her, making her squeak out an eep and spin around. Her bangs moving with her, and she looked at the confused face of her little sister who looked like she had just woken up. "Hanabi," she said, and sighed in relief that she hadn't come when she was changing. It made her quite uncomfortable to let anyone see her without clothes, with her shy nature ever present, and her little sister was no exception. She smiled when the girl walked up to her and put her head on her chest while wrapping her arms around her hips. She hugged her back and brushed her hair softly. "You look really pretty, Ne-sama," Hanabi said sleepily, and Hinata smiled. She broke the hug and crouched down to see her, rubbing her sleepy eyes. She caught her chin and kissed her nose, making Hanabi's face scrunch up in irritation. She let out a giggle and rubbed her cheek softly, making the little girl smile. Her sister was so perfect in her eyes. She was skilled, strong, kind, and really pretty. Just she hung out with that annoying blonde she hated so much all the time. He wasn't worthy to be with her beautiful sister in her eyes. She caught her hand and pulled her elder sister with her to the dining room for breakfast, as her father had called her to bring her to him. She slid the door open to see Hayashi frowning at her, and she blushed in embarrassment looking down at her messy state. "Hanabi, go and get freshened up. That is no way to roam around the house in a half-sleepy state." His stoic voice rang through the house. She stiffened and nodded nervously when she felt a hand on her head and looked up to see the smiling face of Hinata. She smiled and ran off, leaving Hinata alone with Hayashi, who motioned her for a seat. "Hinata, today is the day you graduate," he started, and she nodded, taking the glass of orange juice and sipped it slowly. "Are you sure you want to become a genin? The life of a genin is dangerous. Especially for the heiress of the clan. You could start taking the clan matters." He was cut off by the soft voice of Hinata. It was rare for Hayashi to be cut off, and it was usually only done by his elder daughter, who had grown quite close to him over the years. "Tasama, I want to be a genin and get stronger. The experience in the world will help me grow, and there is still a lot I have to learn before I get involved in clan affairs completely," she said politely, making a ghost of a smile appear on Hayashi's lips, and he looked at her in pride. "You speak wisely, Hinata, you really have grown," he said stoically, making her smile and nod. He looked at her attire and couldn't help but notice how much she had grown over the years, and now she was going to be a genin. The elders were now silent, seeing her grow in both skill and personality. He stood up, confusing her, and she stood herself out of respect, as was the custom. He walked up to her and pulled her head into his chest and wrapped her up in a warm hug. "You have grown so much, my daughter. You look so beautiful, a spitting image of your mother," he whispered with a smile when she hugged him back and nodded in his chest. It was quite rare when he showed her this side of his, but he had opened up a lot, and she came to know he only wanted her to be strong enough so that the clan elders didn't trouble her. "Arigato, Tasama," she whispered when he cupped her cheeks in his hands to get a closer look at her. "Tell that idiotic Namikaze that he must take care of my daughter, or else I will have to remember that underwear prank he pulled on me," he said in a fatherly tone, making her giggle softly and nod. A moment later her eyes widened as she realized the meaning behind his words. He smiled and nodded when he saw she had caught up, and chuckled when he saw her face light up in pure joy. He had seen the team arrangements at the council meeting yesterday and had been adamant to know who his daughter had been placed with. He was glad with the choice of her teammates. She hugged him in joy and he patted her head softly. He and Naruto had an interesting relationship, to say the least. The boy respected him, and he respected the boy for his heritage and skills. At first the boy showed no signs of respect to him, and he knew it was due to Hinata's harsh treatments. He was no fool when he saw the boy acknowledge him slowly when he and Hinata mended their relationship. He had a positive influence on his daughter and he knew she adored the boy. Though he could do without those infamous pranks of his that much to his chagrin never had any proofs to link it to him, though the smirks on the boy's face next day always infuriated him to no end. She broke of the hug and the dazzling smile she flashed him was enough to make him smile himself. He coughed to put on his stoic mask and looked at her seriously. Be strong and keep the Hyuga name strong, Hinata. You represent the clan as our heiress, so make sure to hold yourself like one. He said and she nodded though didn't hear him. He sighed knowing it already and she bowed politely before hopping out happily. I'm going to Sama. She called out and he watched her leave with a fond smile as she was going to take her first step to her new life. The elders had been furious when he had told them of his daughter's wishes, but had shut up when he had told them that she wanted to show the village the power of the clan and gain enough strength and experience before being involved in clan affairs. They had agreed reluctantly, saying she had to take up her responsibilities when she turned 18 and she had agreed to their terms. Hinata walked through the almost empty morning streets after waving to everyone in the clan compounds. Everyone had smiled seeing their heiress so happy. She felt her chest so warm at the thought of Naruto and her being on the same team. She watched her destination come in view and walked to it with a slight jump in her step. Uzumaki Namikaze clan compounds. Kushina was preparing her breakfast with Mito and Menma sprawled on the dining tables in a half-sleepy state. She was surprised when Naruto was the first one up, but she could see he was excited and smiled looking out the window to see the boy lying on the back of his beloved polar bear. He had his arms crossed across the back of his head and knees crossed, one over the other while Akira was nose deep in the water. She couldn't help but gush inwardly at how kawaii he looked like that with his eyes closed, and the wind tickling his silky locks slightly. She was about to call him in for breakfast when she heard the door knock. Coming. She called out and opened the door to see the Hyuga heiress giving her a smile and bowing politely. Ohio Kushina-sama. She said in her soft voice, making the redhead smile and pull her in a bear hug. Kami, you look so pretty, Hinata. And I'm glad you took my advice to grow your hair out. No wonder my baka blonde doesn't let you out of his sights. She gushed, cupping her cheeks, and Hinata's cheeks burned crimson. She herself twirled a bang, framing her face shyly. It was true she had grown her hair out when Kushina had told her to, and had also subtly yet slyly pointed out that Naruto loved her long red hair. Come on in, let's get you some breakfast for the day. She chirped happily and pulled the indigo-haired girl along. Hinata smiled and walked in hand with the Uzumaki clan head who she now viewed as her own mother and had grown quite close to her. And it was also why she had skipped her breakfast at home, knowing Kushina wouldn't let her go without feeding her herself. They walked in the dining room and Hinata's smile fell when she saw no speck of blonde hair on the table. Kushina though smiled seeing her crestfallen expression, already knowing the reason for it. Hinata! She called out from behind the counter and got a soft hi in return. Why don't you go and call my baka blonde in for breakfast? He is out at the lake. She said with a sly smile, making Hinata light up and her cheeks turn pink before she ran out the glass door. Kushina giggled and started putting the food slowly on the plates, keeping her eyes out the window. Hinata ran out the garden and towards the lake in the middle to see her favorite blonde mop of hair glistening in the morning sunshine. Naru! She called out softly, but he heard her crystal clear, and his eyes fluttered open. He let out a small yawn, making her blush at how cute he looked when he put his arm over his knee and turned his gaze to her. Intense azure blue eyes met her shy lavender pearls and her cheeks turned rosy pink when she saw the small soft smile grace his lips. Hin! He called out softly in his own melodic voice and she blushed prettily and fiddled with the hem of her kimono, suddenly finding the pattern on it quite interesting to look at. He stood up on Akira's back, making the bear wake up from its slumber and jumped, flipping in mid-air and landed on the shore with an elegant grace that made her heart flutter. She took in his appearance and all the blood rushed to her cheeks when she looked at him walking to her closely. his simple black t-shirt waving in the wind along with burnt orange pants. The black jacket he held on his left shoulder with the same burnt orange inner lining. Black fingerless gloves he pulled off and tucked in his pockets. She didn't know why, but with each step he took, she felt so nervous and couldn't keep her gaze at his intense eyes. They were like a calm, controlled storm that she couldn't help but adore. She looked down at her hands on her kimono when he stood a couple of feet in front of her. A hand cupped one of her crimson cheeks, making her look at him innocently as he closed the distance between them. She slid her arms around his firm chest slowly and put her cheek against it, hugging him tightly. Naruto wrapped her up in his arms and hid her within his embrace, kissing the top of her head softly. She snuggled in his arms when he kissed her head and tucked her face in his neck. "You look so beautiful, Hin," he said, simply, making her cheeks turn tomato red in embarrassment. She smiled softly, feeling so safe in his arms, and nodded. She felt all her nervousness wash away with his little compliment and looked up to see his smiling face. She went on her toes and pressed her lips on his softly. He kissed her back gently and she relished in contentment. She broke the kiss off after a moment and looked to see him smiling so lovingly when he pulled her face in his neck and she wrapped her arms around his neck. She snuggled in the warmth he emitted and blushed prettily with a smile when she felt his hands roaming across her back softly, making her feel so fuzzy and warm. She felt something poke her in the side of her waist and looked down to see the brown eyes of Akira. She smiled when the bear nuzzled itself around her and purred happily. She pulled off the hug and crouched down, giving her a hug and rubbed the back of her ear, slowly getting some more purrs from the bear. "How are you, Akira-chan?" she asked softly and got a small sniff on her cheek, making her giggle, and hugged the bear happily. Naruto smiled seeing his summon so close to Hinata. She was one of the few who Akira let so close to herself. He chuckled when he saw Akira push her back with her weight and started taking sniffs all across her with small purrs. Hinata giggled and tried to pry off the adorable bear, who now was quite big compared to the little thing she was a few years back. "Alright, Kira, that's enough." Naruto called her by her nickname and the bear got off and wriggled herself around her master. Her ruffled her head, making her purr, and patted it couple of times, giving Hinata a hand to pull her up, who kissed her nose when the bear walked to her side before going back in the lake to cool down and take a nap. Hinata watched her submerge in the water with a smile when an arm slid around her waist and lips attacked her vulnerable neck. She let out a soft moan when soft kisses nipped her sensitive neck and she saw Naruto look at her adoringly while he kissed her soft cheek. He tucked her hair behind her ear, and she shied away cutely when he tried to rub her cheek. "Let's go and have breakfast, Hin," he said, simply, making her nod. She was too embarrassed with her red-hot cheeks, from the kisses on her neck and cheeks he just made, and walked with him inside, stealing glances at him every now and then to see him just calm with a lazy smile like always. Kushina served the food and grinned, sitting beside the heavily blushing Hinata while everyone dug in their food. "So, how were the kisses?" she whispered, making Hinata's eyes widen in shock before she saw the window in the kitchen, and her cheeks burned crimson in embarrassment. She slapped her hands on her cheeks to hide her blush and squeaked out something incoherent, much to Kushina's amusement, and she giggled, pushing the plate to the girl, who was happy for the distraction and ate, not meeting anyone's eyes in shyness. "So are you excited for graduation?" asked Kushina, getting a simple nod from Naruto and Menma while Mito squealed happily and said a loud hi. Hinata gave a meek nod, still not looking up from her lap when a hand came over her own, making her look at Kushina's smiling face. "It's alright, I'm glad you and Naruto are so close. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I already love you like a daughter, Hinata," she said softly, making the heiress smile and nod in relief when Kushina gave her hand a squeeze of reassurance. Kushina herself knew the two were on the same team, having been on the council yesterday, but didn't want to ruin the surprise for Naruto. Naruto finished up and picked up his plates when Kushina told him to leave it there. He picked his jacket up and put it on, while fastening his gloves, and walked out, his hands tucked in his pockets. Hinata excused herself and followed him as they left for the academy. Hinata walked with a bitten lip when Naruto's voice startled her. "What's the matter, Hin?" he asked, making her fiddle with her kimono and smile fondly with a small pink blush. We are going to be on the same team, Naru, Tasama told me. She said softly, and he smirked. I'm glad, he said calmly, his hand grazing hers, and she blushed. She knew what he wanted and entwined her fingers with his, taking his hand in her own. His hand felt so big and safe compared to her soft and small one. They walked in the academy hand in hand, and Naruto opened the door to their classroom. Much to the two's surprise, almost all the students were already there. Every boy's eyes turned to Hinata's new attire and started ogling her. Her kimono was hugging the developing curves of the girl quite nicely, making her the center of attraction for every boy. She hid herself behind Naruto, not liking the eyes on her, and his eyes instantly turned cold and murderous. They all flinched and looked elsewhere when they saw his protective glare. He walked up the stairs with Hinata hiding herself halfway behind him while clutching his jacket shyly. She loved how protective he was of her, it made her feel safe with him. He sat down at his usual corner seat with Hinata by his side. Sasuke made his way to them and sat by Hinata's side, ignoring all the glares the girl was getting because of him, courtesy of the fangirls. Hey Hinata, called out a voice, making her gaze to the side to see Kiba waving at her happily. She smiled and waved back. You look really pretty today, Hinata, he called out, making every eyes turn to the two, and Naruto glanced to his side to see her just smile at him simply and nod. Arigato, Kiba-san, she said softly, and the boy grinned. Naruto looked away in annoyance, not liking why she was talking to the mutt. He felt a hand cover his own and glanced at the softly smiling Hinata. She scooted closer to him and put her head on his shoulder, making most of the girls sigh dreamily when he placed his cheek on her head and wrapped an arm around her waist. I love you, Naru, she whispered softly, making him smile softly and give her a soft squeeze. I love you too, Hin, he whispered, making her blush and smile when he kissed her head like a little child. Get a room, you two, said a third voice, which was too loud in his opinion. He glanced back to see a pink mop of hair and threw her an annoyed glare. Go and pester Sasuke, Haruno, he said in annoyance, making her bristle in anger. She wanted to tell Hinata off about sitting next to her Sasuke-kun, but she couldn't help but envy watching her adorable interaction with the blonde. She was the only girl the two would talk to since Sasuke almost denied their very existence in the world. Sasuke glared at him, which he ignored, and saw the pink mop of hair huff and walk away. Iruka walked in the class, making them all turn silent, and he read through the clipboard in his hands. Alright class, almost all your skills have already been graded from the tests over the past year. Today you'll just have to go through the ninjutsu portion to pass the final exams. I'll call you all alphabetically, so come to the next class for your test. Alright Amy, please follow me, he said and walked out. Pathetic, it is a waste of time, said Sasuke in annoyance, and Naruto couldn't help but nod in agreement. Ano, the basics are really important, said Hinata softly, making him grunt, and Naruto smirked, poking her stomach softly. Really? He asked in an amused tone and enjoyed how she squirmed, trying to get him to not poke her, and blushed prettily. He ran a finger on her arm, making her feel so ticklish. She let out a giggle, and he pulled her head on his shoulder while she sighed happily. You're too cute for your own good, Heim, he whispered, making her blush when he kissed her head, and she snuggled childishly. She heard her name being called and got up, glancing back to him when he gave her a smile, and she nodded. Good luck, Hinata, said Kiba loudly, making her give him a small strained smile and nod. Arigato, Kiba-san, she said softly, turned to Naruto, who was just looking at her lovingly. He knew she wanted to hear the same from him. You don't need it, he said simply with a wink, making her blush prettily and squeak in embarrassment. She ran out quickly and he chuckled softly. Even Sasuke smirked slightly. You're going to kill her from all the blood she stores in her cheeks when she is with you, Namikaze, he said smugly, and Naruto smirked. Jealous Uchiha? He asked innocently and got a glare in return. As if I have better things to do than to hang out with girls, he said smugly, and Naruto smiled. Oh, he said in an amused voice. I didn't know you swung that way, Sasu-chan. He said innocently, making Sasuke's cheeks turn red in embarrassment and anger. I'm not gay. He growled out, making Naruto chuckle. Sure, sure. He said, waving his hand dismissively, and Sasuke bristled in anger silently. Naruto watched her come back with the new shining headband across her neck and smiled, getting up. He walked to the door for his own turn and caught her hand when she was passing by. Wait for me, he said simply, staring into her shy eyes, and she smiled softly before nodding. Hi, she squeaked out shyly and ran out. He smiled, shaking his head, and entered the room to see a smiling Iruka and a mildly glaring Mizuki. He knew he hated him, but he could care less about him. Alright Naruto, please perform the kawarimi, Iruka said, and Naruto nodded. He disappeared and a chair was in his place before he substituted back with it. Iruka scribbled down on his pad before smiling. Alright, now please perform a henge, he said, and Naruto instantly transformed into Shisu before transforming back, and Iruka smiled proudly. Both without hand seals. Excellent, Naruto. Now since we know you cannot do normal clones, please do any cloning technique you wish, he said, and Naruto nodded, holding a half-rem hand seal with his left hand. Ninja art, multi-shadow clone jutsu, he called out, and created 5 clones. Iruka couldn't help but smile in pride before jotting down his score and picking up a headband. That was excellent, Naruto, here you go, he said, putting the headband in front of him, and Naruto took it, running a thumb on the metal with a smile. Congratulations, you graduate. Please be here after lunch for team assignments, he said, and Naruto nodded, fastening it on his forehead, and walked out. He stepped out the main door of the academy and saw his adorable girl sitting on the wooden swing and humming happily with short swings. He smiled and shunshined towards her back before pushing her gently. She brightened up when she glanced at his forehead and swung happily. Congratulations, Naru, she said happily, and he smiled, giving her another push. He loved the small giggles she was letting out, and kept at it for a few minutes. Both jumped up on the branch of the tree and sat down. Naruto placed his back to the bark of the tree and smiled when Hinata snuggled by his side with her face tucked in his neck. He loved feeling her soft breaths and how soft she felt in his arms. Both closed their eyes, ignoring all the eyes that were glancing at them, and Naruto loved the small rays of sunlight between the leaves and the wind that bristled past them. Both didn't even notice before falling in a small nap. Several murmurs ran across the parents that had come to pick their children when they saw the Hyuga heiress sleeping in the arms of the demon brat. Oi Namikaze, wake up, a voice called, and Naruto's eyes fluttered open, and he glanced down at Sasuke. What do you want? He asked sleepily, making the Uchiha sigh. You slept through team placements, you lazy idiot. I am placed on squad 7 with you and Hinata. Some Kakashi Hatake is our Jounin Sensei, he said in his prideful voice, and twitched when Naruto just yawned and closed his eyes again. Yeah, go and do something for a couple of hours then. Kakashi is late for almost everything, he said lazily so as to not wake up the girl in his arm while he brushed her silky hair that he had let out of the confines of her ribbon. You know him, came the curious voice of the Uchiha as he jumped up and sat on the branch while Naruto kept his eyes closed. Sasuke plucked an orange from the tree and started munching through it. Yeah, he's a family friend. Apparently one of the best jounins the village has to offer. Is lazy and perverted too. He is infamous for being late to almost everything that isn't really urgent, he said, and Sasuke sighed tiredly. Great, now we have 2 lazy asses on our squad, he grunted, and Naruto kissed Hinata's head when she squirmed slightly and she snuggled in his neck to hide from the light falling on her eyes. The 3 sat silently as Sasuke too lay down on a branch above to wait for their sensei, having nothing to do for now. He pulled his headband over his eyes and went for a nap himself. Meanwhile, at the academy, Kakashi strolled in the empty hallways of the academy almost 2 hours late and slid the door to the assigned classroom with an eye smile. Yo. Sorry I'm late, you see minus he stopped and sweat dropped when he saw the empty classroom in front of him. He walked out the main door and glanced straight at the tree in front of the academy, which had his squad sleeping soundly on it and sunshined on the branch. He crouched down in front of Naruto and I smiled at the adorable scene in front of him. His 3 charges looked so cute sleeping like this. "Yo!" he called out, making the 3 pairs of eyes flutter open. Hinata rubbed her eyes sleepily, and Naruto too did the same while Sasuke rubbed his head. Naruto saw the masked Jounin and grinned lazily. "Yo! Kakashi-sensei," he said happily, making the Jounin eye smile and rub his head sheepishly. "Sorry I'm late, you see I got lost on the path of life," he said, making Naruto narrow his eyes at him. "Make up your own excuses," he said lazily, making the Jounin turn a bit sheepish. "Mama Naruto, well, let's get introduced, shall we?" he asked, sitting down himself. Naruto saw Hinata look at him confused and he kissed her lips softly. "Me, you and Sasuke are on the same team and Kakashi is our Jounin sensei Hin," he whispered, making her cheeks turn pink, and she nodded, shying away cutely when he tucked her hair behind her ear. "Why don't you introduce yourself first? We don't know anything about you," said Sasuke, making the Jounin nod with an eye smile. I suppose that's fair. Well, my name is Kakashi Hatake. I have lots of likes and dislikes, which you are too young to know. As for hobbies, I have lots of hobbies. Dream for the future. Never really thought about it," he said lazily, and Sasuke grunted in annoyance at his stupid introduction. Hinata giggled softly when he turned to her with an eye smile. "Why don't you go next, princess?" he said, pointing a finger at her, and she nodded meekly. "Oh no. My name is Hinata Hyuga. I like cinnamon rolls, lavenders and pressing flowers. I also like," she whispered softly and glanced to the side and instantly averted her eyes with a blush when Naruto gave her a wink. Kakashi felt quite happy at their interactions. It would be quite nice for teamwork, he supposed. "I dislike people who trouble others for any reasons. They do not understand. I love training and taking care of flowers and spending time with Hanabi and Naruto-kun. I want to have a nice family and become a good head of my clan someday," she said softly, making the Jounin nod and eye smile. He turned his gaze up to Sasuke. "You're up next, emo prince," he said, making the Uchiha glare at him heatedly for the nickname. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I like training and I dislike wasting my time, and I hate fangirls. I like challenging Namikaze to a spar every now and then, I guess. My dream is not just a dream but an ambition. I'll destroy a certain someone and restore my clan," he said darkly, making Kakashi turn serious, and Hinata glanced at him worriedly. Naruto already knew who he was talking about and kept quiet. Kakashi turned to him, breaking out of his thoughts, and I smiled. "Alright, my ball of sunshine, you're next," he said, and expected a glare, but sweat dropped when Naruto yawned before nodding. He pulled Hinata to himself, who squeaked in embarrassment while he pressed her back on his chest. He put his chin on her shoulder and spoke up. "My name is Naruto Namikaze. I like training with the old man, spending time with my cat-chan and observing things, especially nature. I dislike people who hate things they do not understand and people who hurt innocent people close to me. I love my little kitten," he said, nuzzling his cheek with the pink cheek of Hinata, who was blushing prettily at his words. "I dislike people who try to push me into doing things I don't want, I guess. I love studying history and seals and sleep in the places I love in my free time," he said, and Kakashi waited for him to go on, but realized he was done. "What about your dreams?" he asked, making Naruto rub Hinata's stomach in thought while she felt warm and fuzzy from his tender strokes. Don't know, I guess get stronger and have my kitten in my arms all the time," he said, making Hinata's cheeks burn crimson, though Kakashi caught the meaning in his words. He doesn't have a dream yet. Tobirama-sama was right when he said he didn't like being chained down. A loose cannon for now then? He thought and nodded. "Well, you 3 are all unique and have great potential. So now I should tell you of the real test tomorrow," he said, making them all look at him curiously with a bit of confusion. The graduation test was just to see if you 3 have the potential to be genin. Your Jounin sensei decides if you do become a genin or return to the academy for some extra training for another year. He explained, making the three nod. Figures, that graduation test was too idiotic anyway. Sasuke said, making Kakashi sweat drop. He had expected them to get worried or blow up, but they were really surprising him today. Well, tomorrow morning you three will do a survival exercise with me. I'll decide who will go to the academy and who remains a genin. Remember that this test has a minimum 66% failure rate, meaning only a third of your classes, graduates, will pass it. So I'll see you all tomorrow morning at 6. Johnny, he said with an eye smile, but stopped for a moment. Oh, and don't eat or you'll puke, he said, and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Sasuke jumped down and called out, I guess we'll meet at 8 then and have breakfast, he asked, and Naruto smirked before nodding, and Sasuke nodded back and walked away. He felt Hinata turn around and look at him worriedly when she took out a handkerchief and started wiping the sweat of his cheeks and face. You had another bad dream? She asked softly, and he said nothing, just gazed into her shy eyes calmly. She had felt his erratic heartbeat and how he had perfectly masked it from everyone but her. She knew he had dreams because of his tenant, and they haunted him almost every night. She kissed his whiskered cheek softly and rubbed it when he leaned into her touch and gazed at her lovingly. You can talk to me, she said softly, making him smile. He pulled her in a hug and brushed her long hair gently. He didn't want to talk about it. Just stay with me, Hen, he whispered in a small voice, making her hug him back tightly and nod in his chest. I'm here, Naru, I'm always here for you, she said in her soft voice, and he let out a small breath. He couldn't hide anything from her and told her about everything. She was the only one who knew what all he could do except Tobirama. He hadn't even let his mother in on some of the things he talked to her with. She soothed him with her gentleness and how he loved holding her like this. It felt so nice. I love you, he whispered shakily, making her smile. And I love you, she whispered, knowing how much he needed to hear it from her lips. He nuzzled his face in her neck. She felt her skin get wet slightly and felt him tremble in her arms. She ran her fingers through his hair while he cried softly in her arms, letting his heart out in front of her. She knew how much he was tormented from all he endured, whether he was awake or asleep. And she was glad he poured his heart out to her. Sometimes he would just sneak into her house for just a small hug, and she would instantly know he was troubled, and they would stay the night snuggled in each other's arms. It was their little secret that she never wanted anyone to know. He stopped after a minute, and she kissed away his tears and wiped his cheeks with her handkerchief. You feel better? She asked softly, and he nodded slowly. She rubbed his whiskers gently and kissed his lips softly. The small smile he graced her with made her have butterflies in her stomach as they relished each other's presence and watched the sun go down together, relishing in each other's arms. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.